The story begins in the capital of the Necrocories in an era when gods, spirits, and sorcery ruled the world, where the last demon lord battled with his army of skeletons against the 6 heroes and other humans who received healing powers from winged beings. After some time at war in the civil year of 447 of the Holy God, the demon lord realizes that he was being defeated after being reminded by his 2 subjects, a girl named Sherry and a wolf named Blackus, that all the other domains had already fallen, including the castle of Azra, the lord of the underworld, with that fortress being the only one left, the reason the 6 heroes were giving their all to make their domains fall. They still had the help of magic beings like the great sage Arl, which irritates the demon lord, but being the last one left, he thinks he has to ensure that the promise he made is fulfilled and accepts his defeat because as an undead, he can resurrect 1,000 years later to reclaim his throne. In the future, 2 girls, Celia and Regina, enter a ruin to fulfill a mission of locating the Nest of the Voids. They report what they see to a girl through a communicator, and she reminds them that self-defense is the only permitted form of combat. After a while, they report that they were already on the 7th floor of the ruin and hadn't found any magical anomalies related to the voids yet. The girl in the communicator responds that as soon as they find the nest, they should leave immediately since it's a reconnaissance mission, but at that moment, they lose communication. Although they were getting deeper into the ruin, making the return difficult, they realize they must continue because the voids make their nests in the depths of underground ruins. A bit further, they find some creatures resembling statues and deduce they are personal items buried with the deceased, wondering if there was an important king buried nearby. They follow the path and find a large portal that causes their devices to beep. Celia notices some writing on the door and takes a photo of the text without knowing what language it is. While she analyzes the writing, Regina goes to explore another part of the ruin. Alone, Celia feels like she's seen that before, and when she touches the writing, the door immediately lights up and opens, startling her. She takes out her weapon as a precaution, and the lights reveal the area. As she approaches, her device shuts down from being overwhelmed by the energy, and Celia notices that someone is trapped inside the crystal. In the past, the demon lord met a girl named Roselia, to whom he had made that promise. She tells him that a millennium from now, when the stars fall from the sky, a vessel for his power will appear in the form of a human child, and it is his duty to find it. After reminding him of his task, she departs to await the day they will reunite. Back in the present, as Celia fires shots at the crystal, trying to break it and save the person inside, the demon lord is puzzled by the presence of a person there since the magical barrier seal should have made that place completely inaccessible. He wonders if 1,000 years have already passed since the reincarnation ritual seems to have worked and uses a language analysis spell to understand what the girl is saying, thinking she might be a tomb raider. He decides to punish the intruder and breaks the crystal, freeing himself and startling Celia. She grabs her weapon as a precaution and the lights come on, revealing the area. As she approaches, her device shuts down from being overwhelmed by the energy and Celia notices that someone is trapped inside the crystal. At that moment, the demon lord realizes his appearance, and upon looking in the reflection through a piece of crystal, he is shocked to see that he looks like a young boy. He is baffled as to why he has returned to the world in his Leonis, a hero form. Celia examines him to see if he's injured, leaving the demon embarrassed. She thinks his memory must be confused from being trapped in the crystal and embraces him to try to calm him, promising to keep him safe. Despite considering her behavior disrespectful, the demon finds her embrace strangely pleasant and faints shortly after. Sometime later, the demon eats a dried grape biscuit, recognizing that the texture isn't bad but finding it pathetic that his current body, a lord like himself, would lose consciousness from hunger. He also finds himself oddly drawn to the girl's disrespectful attitude. Finally, Celia introduces herself as Roselia Ray Crystalia, a 15-year-old swordswoman in training and a member of the 18th platoon of the Excalibur Academy in the 7 Assault Garden. However, the demon can only understand her name and age but thinks of using the girl to gather information about the current world. She then asks for his name, and the demon introduces himself as Leonis Magnus. He thinks she will recognize his name, imagining that it must have been passed down through generations as an inspiring legend. However, she only finds the name pleasant, making Leonis realize he was mistaken. Celia asks his age, and he says he must be around 10 years old, making her think that the boy must have been kidnapped by someone since there's no way a child like him could have reached that ruin alone, deducing it must have been a void. Leonis asks what a void is, making her increasingly certain that he has suffered some form of amnesia. Meanwhile, Regina continues to explore the ruin and notices something moving. She quickly arms herself, activating her Excalibur. At the same time, Celia explains to Leonis that the voids are humanity's enemies that suddenly appeared 64 years ago, and nobody knows what they are or what they want, with one theory being that they came from another world, and were named voids because they signify nothing. Leonis finds that explanation to be the vaguest he has ever heard, and Celia continues, saying she came to the ruin on an investigation, as void nests are usually found in ancient ruins like that one. At that moment, Leonis realizes he forgot to ask the most important question and inquires about the current year in the calendar of the holy god to see if the 1,000 years have indeed passed since the battle. However, she responds that they are in the year 64 of the unified human calendar. Suddenly, there is a loud noise and Regina communicates with Celia, saying she has detected a colossal void. Then everything shakes and she shields Leonis to protect him. At that moment, an ogre-class void appears, breaking a wall, and Leonis wonders why it's called an ogre when it doesn't look like one. Celia starts shooting at the void with no effect, and Leonis thinks about taking matters into his own hands since destroying that place disrespects his former companions who were buried there. However, he's not yet accustomed to his small body and ends up falling. Regina appears and attacks the void with her weapon, launching a powerful attack at the creature, but unfortunately, it resists the damage, making Leonis wonder because that attack was on par with a Phase 4 explosion spell. Regina asks Celia to leave the battle to her and to get out of the ruin. So after telling her friend to be careful, Celia runs toward the exit with Leonis. As she runs, he thinks that thanks to his current fragile body, he's not in a position to restore his former kingdom, and to make matters worse, the voids cause a lot of damage to his domain. Since Celia is his only source of information, he decides to hide the fact that he's the demon lord to make it easier to get answers from her. Suddenly, a crystal falls in their path, revealing itself to be a wyvern-class void. The creature prepares to attack, and Leonis thinks about making it regret destroying his domain. However, Celia pushes him away in an attempt to protect the boy and takes a fatal blow. As Celia meets her end, she speaks with difficulty, telling Leonis to go to Regina so she can take him to safety, and apologizes for not being able to keep him safe as she promised. Those are her final words. Leonis thinks about how foolish he was to believe that he couldn't withstand such a weak attack, remembering when he met Roselia during his time as a weak human hero. Two more void creatures of the same class as the previous one emerge and start attacking Leonis, unable to inflict any damage on him. He finds it ridiculous that he's feeling the loss of the girl, considering he let her survive only to gather information, although he admits to having liked her a bit. Determined to make the creatures pay for their actions, Leonis grabs his staff. He uses a gravity manipulation spell to crush the first void, then eliminates another with ice thorns, and the last one with a fire attack. After defeating the three, he's puzzled that their bones resisted a Phase 8 spell, reflecting on how his magical powers are now only about a third as strong as before in his new body. Leonis contemplates that, as a demon lord, he shouldn't care about the life of a simple human. However, Celia gave her life to keep him safe, making him recognize the girl's courage. He attempts to use a healing spell, despite it not being his specialty, as it belongs to the realm of death. Slowly, Celia starts to heal, a symbol appearing on her leg and her eye turning red. She gradually returns to life, while Leonis thinks she won't be pleased when she discovers what he did to her. Meanwhile, Regina finally manages to defeat the ogre-class void and tries to communicate with Celia. Leonis is surprised by humans' ability to develop such complex magical technology as that long-distance communication device. Celia regains consciousness, relieved to see that Leonis is safe, which surprises him since she's more concerned about him than herself. However, she soon realizes she's still alive, and Leonis invents that her injuries weren't as severe as they seemed, explaining that he used a healing spell. Celia shows no knowledge of such spells. Leonis finds this strange but understands that humans unable to use spells rely on advanced magic. Celia then asks if the healing spell was some sort of Excalibur power, explaining that her academy documented cases of Excaliburs with healing abilities. Leonis says he doesn't know much about it, and Celia reveals that when the voids first appeared decades ago, mysterious abilities emerged in children everywhere. Most of these abilities took the form of weapons, powers they used to fight the voids, which is why they were called Excaliburs. She explains that despite not fully understanding how they worked, it seemed they incorporated the personality of their user. The weapon Draghowl is Regina's Excalibur, but Celia reveals she hasn't been blessed with her own Excalibur yet. At that moment, Regina appears, concerned about Celia's wound. Only then does Celia remember to ask Leonis about the void that attacked them. He invents that it cowered in fear and disappeared when he looked up, and Celia believes him because the voids often acted in ways they couldn't comprehend. Leaving the ruins, Celia briefs Regina on what she learned about the boy, and the three of them ride together on a motorcycle with Leonis sitting behind Celia. Regina finally introduces herself to him, explaining that she's Celia's maid. On the way, she begins teasing the boy, making Leonis uncomfortable with how a powerful undead king is being ridiculed by a simple girl. They finally arrive at a place that Celia explains is humanity's fortress, Built to resist the voids, the castle that houses various holy swordsmen and the blades they use for attack called the 7th Assault Garden. Seeing that fortress, Leonis has no doubt that he is indeed 1,000 years in the future. 6 years ago, in the 3rd Assault Garden Fortress, humans suffer a massive void attack. Some citizens, including the elderly and children, took refuge in a shelter, and Celia and Regina were among them. Both were terrified, but Celia tried to calm her friend by saying that her father was leading the battle directly, and she was sure they would win because he, along with her mother, siblings, and knights, had never lost a battle. However, as the situation grew scarier, they started chatting as a distraction. Celia mentioned that once everything was over, she would get her Excalibur to fight alongside her father, just like her brothers. She also said she would start attending the training school next week. She continued talking about the importance of acquiring knowledge and how her father gave her a stack of books. Despite her efforts, she felt she would age before finishing them all because there were so many. She also mentioned her mother planning a party on the day of her enrollment ceremony. As the situation worsened, Celia panicked, wanting to run to her family, but Regina held her and reassured her, making them go back to talking about the party, with Celia crying and promising that everything would be fine. After a while, the shelter's doors finally opened. The place was in ruins and the thousands of Excalibur users had been decimated, including Celia's family. As people gathered the few survivors, Celia cried, apologizing to Regina for lying when she said everything would be fine. Now Celia and Regina arrive with Leonis at the 7th Assault Garden Fortress, where the two girls lived. Celia promises herself that she will never lie again. Leonis is impressed by the place, and Regina explains that Assault Garden's mission is to navigate the seas and serve as the front line against the voids, leaving Leonis even more impressed by the fact that such a large place can move. Afterwards, Celia reports what she found in her investigation at the ruins over the phone and says she'll take the rejected boy to his dormitory, mentioning that he already seemed to have an Excalibur. This surprises Regina because Leonis is too young to have an Excalibur. Celia explains that they called people expelled from their countries due to void attacks rejected. Celia tells Leonis that he will be living at the Excalibur Academy, an institution that trains Excalibur users where all children with powers live in exchange for guaranteed life. Then Regina says she'll go shopping to prepare dinner later, and Celia explains to Leonis that people from outside need to be verified before entering the fortress. She tells him to go there and meet her at the exit, leaving the boy alone. Leonis takes the opportunity to enter the bathroom to avoid being seen and thinks about how, instead of executing his plan to gather the Demon King's army to eradicate the human race, he's now among humans who have advanced a lot in 1,000 years in the form of a child and has to deal with monsters called voids. He then summons his two partners, Blackus and Sherry, who are surprised by Leonis' new appearance, as they met him when he had already become the Demon King. He explains to the two that they are in Immobile Fortress City number 7, indicating that there are 6 others like it, and that the world has changed a lot in the last 1,000 years he was away. He wants the two of them to investigate the city without drawing attention, while he infiltrates the human training school to gather information and supplies for his body, which now needed food. And so he sets them free and goes to the location Celia mentioned, where he triggers the system alarm due to his magical energy. Immediately, he conceals it, stopping the alarm and setting himself free. Next, Leonis receives an ID card, and Celia, who is waiting for him, takes it and snaps a photo to send to the academy, explaining that it was necessary to register his features to gain entry into the school and receive official identification. She keeps his eye to prevent him from losing it, and before they head to the dormitory, she decides to give Leonis a tour of the academy. Along the way, he notices that the city is quite peaceful despite being on the front lines, and Celia explains that the 7th Assault Garden has never been breached by the voids. Arriving at the academy, she shows him the military command center, and then the classroom, auditorium, library, and the laboratory, explaining that they also had a dance room and an entertainment area, in addition to the students' dormitories, which were close to a large swimming pool. Leonis asks why they have things like a dance room and a pool, and Celia explains that Excalibur is a weapon that originates from the heart of its user, and if the person is sad, they can't achieve its full power, which happened in the second fortress that only had military training facilities. She continues to introduce the academy, showing where his evaluation will take place the following day. Suddenly, she feels weak. Nearby, 2 students are practicing, and she remembers that after resting, she needs to train to acquire Excalibur as quickly as possible. They continue their path, passing by 2 girls, and Celia explains that they are near the female dormitory. Then, a guy named Musil Rhodes appears, and Leonis immediately senses that he and Celia don't get along. He notices her injury and taunts her, saying that she once again went on a mission beyond her capacity. Upon seeing Leonis, he laughs, mentioning that in addition to leading the rowdy group, she takes care of children. Celia explains that Leonis is an Excalibur user and Musil teases him as well, but Leonis decides to let it go because he doesn't want to draw attention. Musil then invites Celia to join his group, reasoning that if she joined his team, she wouldn't have to endanger herself on missions and could stay at the academy without having to manifest power, just like the other girls who accompany him. Of course, she declines the offer and continues on her way, but Musil becomes agitated and grabs Celia by her hair. Leonis decides to intervene and uses his power to make the guy fall to the ground. He approaches Musil and tells him that idiots like him shouldn't touch someone's hair. Terrified of Leonis, Musil activates his Excalibur, but another girl appears and reminds him that it's prohibited to use Excalibur without permission, especially in an area of the female dormitory. She threatens to report the situation to the supervisor if he doesn't leave immediately. Musil departs and the girl greets Celia, introducing herself to Leonis as Elfine Philip, an analyst on Celia's team. Leonis notices that her Excalibur is different from the others. Elfine apologizes to Celia for not joining her on the mission, explaining that she didn't have much time because she had to analyze some data for the supervisor, including abnormal magical energy reactions in the ocean. She mentions that she was waiting for the elite investigation team to gather more data on the matter because she couldn't make sense of the data she already had. Suddenly, Celia feels dizzy again, and Leonis understands what's happening to her. They head back to the dormitory to rest, and Leonis notices that their dorm is much older than the others he saw in the city. Celia explains that their assignments are based on the Excalibur user team's performance, since the Academy highly values achievements. High-performing teams can move to newer dormitories, some of which even have jacuzzis, although Leonis has no idea what a jacuzzi is. They enter the dorm, and Celia shows him Regina's room, but she's already asleep since she used her Excalibur's power, which consumes a lot of energy from the user. Then they go to Celia's room, and it's only when they arrive that Leonis realizes that it's a girl's dorm. However, Celia reassures him, saying that there's no problem with him being a child. She asks him to take a shower first. While he's getting ready to shower, Celia asks if he'll want to join her team when the verification of his Excalibur is completed. However, when Leonis sneezes, she decides it's better to continue their conversation after the shower. As he turns on the shower, Leonis thinks that it must be some kind of water and fire magic to keep the water warm. He then starts soaping his hair, not having a clue about how it works. Shortly after, Celia enters the bathroom and tells him to use the shampoo on his head. This makes the boy quite nervous because she entered the bathroom without any notice, right when he was starting to relax in the shower. She helps him wash his hair and continues their conversation, emphasizing that he is free to choose any team he wants to join. She points out that his healing power is valuable and high-level teams will definitely be interested in recruiting him. She advises him to choose one of them since her team is not the best fit for him, given that she hasn't awakened her Excalibur's power yet. Nevertheless, she tells him that he's very welcome if he decides to be part of her team, even though she isn't the strongest. Leonis admires Celia's honesty and sense of justice, and he asks why she fights so hard when she has the option to seek protection without risking her life, especially since she hasn't awakened her Excalibur's power. She replies that she doesn't want to be merely protected, she wants to fight directly. At this moment, Celia starts feeling dizzy again and suddenly collapses. Leonis touches her leg, causing the same symbol to appear on her that appeared on him when he used his healing magic. This makes her eyes turn red, and with Leonis' assistance, she gets up and feeds on his blood. After coming to her senses, she's frightened and doesn't understand why she did that. Leonis explains that he lied when he said he healed her with his Excalibur's power, revealing that he can't bring someone back from the brink, meaning that the girl had actually passed away. 2 years ago, at the Excalibur Academy, Celia trained diligently in the sword technique she had learned from her brothers. It was something etched in her heart, and she hoped that her Excalibur would be a sword. By training in this technique, she aspired to awaken her Excalibur, as it was a power connected to the soul. During that time, Musil had already been bothering the girl, trying to convince Celia that training was futile, and that she should join his platoon. As usual, Celia declined his offer. Since Musil wouldn't take no for an answer, Regina stepped in, threatening him with her Excalibur, even though it was forbidden to use it without authorization. As Musil departed with his platoon, Regina told Celia that when she managed to awaken her Excalibur, cowards like him wouldn't bother her anymore. However, Celia revealed that she didn't desire the Excalibur for that reason. Currently, Celia woke up after a long period of being unconscious when she learned she was no longer alive. Upon seeing Leonis, she inquired about his true identity. Leonis explained that he was a sorcerer who had resurrected her. In his era, magic energy was used by people to cast spells. He clarified that he had brought her back not with the power of Excalibur, but with a level 10 spell. He informed her that she was now the strongest undead in the world, the queen of vampires, relying on blood to recharge her magical energy. Leonis noticed her sadness and apologized, explaining that it was the only way to save her. Celia then shared that when she was 9 years old, her homeland had been attacked by the Void, and she had lost her entire family. Her family, all Excalibur users, had fought to the end to protect the city. The catastrophic event was known as the Stampede, and after that day, she and Regina were taken to the academy because everyone expected Celia to be an Excalibur user like the rest of her family. However, since she couldn't awaken her power, she believed that if she faced a Void, her Excalibur would appear, so she started venturing on dangerous missions. Leonis understood Celia's frustration for not being able to awaken her Excalibur on her last mission. She then asked if she could still have her Excalibur as a vampire, and he replied that he didn't know but believed that she would become even stronger as an undead. Suddenly, the boy's stomach made a loud noise, and Celia realized he hadn't eaten since yesterday. They went to a restaurant, and there Celia asked if, as a vampire, she still needed to eat. Leonis explained that a high-level vampire could eat normally, though it took a while for food to convert into magical energy. She then asked what he wanted to eat, and since Leonis was unfamiliar with most of the dishes, he said a bread would do. Celia mentioned that this would keep his nutrition low, and he found it amusing that a vampire was talking about nutrition. This made Celia feel a bit uneasy, and Leonis apologized, realizing that she would have difficulty accepting the situation as she hadn't become undead by choice, unlike him who had done it in his past by Roselia's invitation. Then she offered to pay for his meal, assuming the boy had no money. However, Leonis took one of his gold coins and mentioned that just one of those could buy the entire restaurant. He thought Celia was surprised by his wealth, but in fact he was the one surprised because in current times everyone used magical-based credits, making his 2,000 gold coins worthless. At that moment, a girl named Sakuya entered the restaurant with 2 men who were demanding payment from her. Despite Sakuya's assertion that she had already paid her debt, they continued insisting for more money. She asked them to wait a week for her to gather more, but the men were looking for an opportunity to exploit the situation for something else's payment. Immediately, she fought them, making it clear that she had already set her payment deadline and they should return the following week. Then Sakuya approached Celia because she was one of the girls in her platoon. Celia learned that Sakuya had been suspended due to her poor grades. Sakuya explained that she had indeed been suspended and had come to the city to have some fun. She mentioned that the 2 men were henchmen from the casino she visited. She noticed the ancient coin Leonis was holding and asked if he was the boy Elfine had mentioned to her. Celia said that he was now the first line of defense for her platoon, having defeated a Void by himself. Sakuya introduced herself to Leonis, and then they sat down to eat. Leonis realized that Sakuya's uniform was different from the other students, and she explained that it was a traditional outfit from her village in Oran, a memento of her brother. She revealed that her entire clan in the village had been killed by the Voids, and Leonis understood that her goal was to seek revenge against these creatures. Shortly after, 2 other female students from the academy came to demand another debt from Sakuya, and Celia scolded her friend as her grades were poor due to her gambling addiction. Later, Leonis met the supervisor named Disgrace Alt, who was going to conduct a test to determine the type of Excalibur he possessed. She asked him to retrieve his weapon, and Leonis did so, summoning his sealed Sin's scepter. Disgrace inquired about the nature of that Excalibur's power, and he replied, somewhat confused, that it was a support type. This led the supervisor to conclude that it was a versatile Excalibur. Then Leonis noticed some robots in the area, and Celia explained that they were Void simulators that would battle him. The supervisor explained that as Leonis had a support weapon, he would need a partner on the front line. In a matter of seconds, Leonis disintegrated the metal of all the simulators, even though he had held back his power. Disgrace was perplexed by how he had accomplished this with his support Excalibur, and to cover up, he suggested he had struck a weakness in the robots. This drew the attention of the other students, and the supervisor decided to prepare a replacement for the simulators. Musil appeared and requested to be a replacement. As a level 1 Excalibur user, he had the right to assume that role. He took the weapons of the girls in his platoon as his Excalibur Dominion made the girls a part of his weapon. Leonis was fine with the arrangement and asked if it was just a matter of defeating Musil and the 4 girls to pass the test. However, Celia had no idea about her own power, so she requested the supervisor's permission to help him, as she was his guardian. Musil agreed, but on the condition that if she lost, she would have to join his platoon. Leonis accepted the condition as long as Musil never bothered Celia again if he lost. Musil agreed to the terms, and Celia questioned Leonis' decision, but he assured her that he wouldn't lose his guardian. The fight began, and Celia showed her sword skills, taking on the girls from Musil's platoon. He then ordered one of the girls to attack Leonis. He concentrated to control his power better, as this time he wasn't fighting against simulators. The demon summoned the Hand of Death from the realm of shadows to protect him from the girl's attack and immobilize her, causing her to fall. Meanwhile, the other girls continued attacking Celia, and she asked how long Musil would hide behind them. Regina rushed to the room where they were dueling, realizing it was the day of Leonis' test. She couldn't understand why Celia was fighting. After defeating all the girls in Musil's platoon, Celia faced Musil. However, he quickly used his Excalibur to dominate her. Celia was paralyzed and couldn't move, and Musil enjoyed the situation. He said he would deal with the boy first, and then attend to her. However, Celia's worry for Leonis led her to finally awaken her Excalibur, impressing everyone with her inherited sword from her family. Not only did she awaken, but she also broke free from Musil's domination. He was terrified, and before he could dominate her again, Celia shattered his Excalibur, freeing the 4 girls from his control. Defeated, Musil admitted his defeat, and Leonis passed his test despite having done very little in the duel. Later, Celia thanked Leonis, and he referred to her as his familiar again, telling her there was no need to thank him. Celia asked what a familiar was, and he explained that it was a protective creature for its master. She then said she would continue to protect him, finding the situation amusing. She then asked Leonis to make her even stronger, and he expressed his desire to do exactly that. Later, they all gathered to celebrate Celia's Excalibur awakening and Leonis' admission to the academy. Sakuya inquired about her weapon, and Celia explained it was a lightweight and sharp sword. This led everyone to suggest names for the Excalibur, but Celia preferred to choose one only when she fully mastered it. They then welcomed Leonis, who had become their new comrade. Sakuya asked in which room he would sleep, as all the rooms in the dormitory had been converted into storage. All 3 girls offered their rooms to Leonis, saying he could share the space with them. Celia desperately claimed he would stay in her room, as it would make it easier for both of them to keep their secret. However, she couldn't reveal the truth, so Leonis said it made sense for him to stay with her because she had found him and she was his guardian. Everyone understood the reason. Later, Leonis went to Elfina's room for her to record his biometric data in the academy. There, she explained that her Excalibur was used to observe and analyze data, although it had once been used for combat. She mentioned that after losing her 2 companions to a void on a mission, her Excalibur lost its original power, and because she couldn't fight anymore, Celia invited her to join her platoon. At that moment, she finished registering Leonis, and he noticed a map on the computer. He asked to take a look, so she made a backup for him, and he analyzed the map in his room while Celia took her shower. With the map, Leonis realized a connection between the voids and the battlefield where his fleet and the Great Sage had fought. He then called for Blackus to retrieve all the information he had gathered so far. Blackus informed him that in the underground of that floating island, there was a large magical crystal buried, which humans called the Magic Forge, and used it to power the entire city. Leonis thought of using this technology to their advantage and asked Blackus to continue his investigation. Then Sherry appeared and showed him a food item called a donut. She had various types of food they didn't know about to show to Leonis. However, she mentioned that from what she could see, no one knew about the Demon King or the War of 1,000 years ago. Leonis had suspected as much, but it seemed strange that such a significant war had been forgotten. At that moment, Sherry heard the shower and asked if Leonis had really turned Celia into a familiar displaying jealousy. Suddenly, Celia turned off the shower and Sherry quickly left. Nearby, some men explored the ocean and reported that they hadn't found any signs of the void so far. Suddenly, they saw something strange and were attacked by several tentacles from a creature. In a flashback from the year 432, in the vicinity of the city of Shiden, Leonis, who was still an Excalibur hero, was escorting a miner to a location where there had been some monster attacks. Leonis had been working as a vigilant in the city's outskirts for 16 years. The miner comments on how it's still possible to be attacked by monsters even with a few workers in the mine, but feels safe being escorted by an Excalibur hero. Leonis then mentions that His Majesty had already given him the order to protect the entire area. The miner finds Leonis an impressive hero and expresses a wish for the other 6 heroes to be out there killing monsters like Leonis, instead of staying in the Imperial capital. Leonis laughs and says he just toys with those creatures, but it would be fun if they could tame those monsters. The miner is surprised to hear this, especially from the hero who defeated the Demon King Zorbatis. They then arrive at the mine area, and Leonis asks where the monsters are, but he realizes that the miner he was escorting has disappeared, leaving him alone. The situation starts to get strange, and when Leonis thinks about drawing his sword, 3 mages appear and mobilize him with magic. He realizes that he has fallen into a trap. Several armed men arrive and restrain Leonis with hooks to prevent him from escaping, while others position themselves with spears and fatally wound him. The men comment on how Leonis had made them very worried, but ended up dying too easily. The reason for the attack was that Leonis had gained more popular support than the king himself, clearly showing that he had been the victim of a betrayal. The men then leave Leonis injured, saying he could have saved himself if he had accepted a bribe. A while later, the goddess Roselia appears to Leonis. They discuss how Leonis knew about the trap but did nothing because he doesn't blame humans for what happened. Leonis says he doesn't care about the state of the world because in the end he will remain as he is. Goddess Roselia says she has always watched over Leonis and won't give up on him because he sees things differently. She expresses her interest in him and wants Leonis to belong to her. Leonis then wakes up thinking about Roselia. He remembers that he was supposed to meet her and rebuild his army of demons, as that is his goal now, after 1,000 years. Leonis notices bite marks on his neck. He goes to Celia's bed and orders her to wake up. Celia, without understanding, immediately gets up at Leonis' command. She says she doesn't know why she woke up so suddenly, but Leonis explains that he placed the mark of obedience on her when he turned her into a vampire, making her his familiar. Leonis explains that this means she has to obey his commands and protect him from any danger. He then asks Celia why she fed on him without permission. Celia apologizes and explains that she couldn't resist her hunger during the night. Leonis says he doesn't mind Celia feeding on him, but that she should ask for permission next time. She understands and agrees to let him know if the situation arises again. Celia then receives a call from Finnet. She says she noticed something strange and wanted to inform Celia. She explains that there was a strategy discussion meeting that was very unusual, happening early in the morning on a day off. Finnet explains that she doesn't know the content of the meeting but believes it is related to an ongoing investigation. Celia asks Finnet if she had investigated the strait in the sea near the city, and Finnet says yes, but she hadn't found much information so far, but she would continue to update Celia if anything happened. Celia then tells Leonis that since it was a day off from school, she would like to take a stroll with him through the city's streets. He jokes that since she fed on him the previous night, it's natural for Celia to want to burn off some energy, which makes the girl feel embarrassed. In the meeting at the 7th Assault Garden headquarters, several generals gather to discuss the missing and uncommunicative investigation team. One of the leaders wonders if the entire 13th squad was annihilated. Meanwhile, another leader comments that even though the commander traveled to the capital just a year and a half ago, there have been many problems and void attacks in his absence. An analyst then mentions that according to transmission data, the presence of a void was registered for 3 seconds, prompting one of the generals to recognize that it's common for voids to appear briefly and cause significant damage. Still, doing so in 3 seconds is a very short time. They discuss the possibility that the cause of the investigation team's disappearance might have been a void load, not a common void, which could signify a new threat. This reminds one of the leaders of the tragedy that occurred at the 3rd Fortress Assault Garden 6 years ago, the same island where Celia and Regina lived. The commander says he hasn't forgotten the tragedy, which is why they've increased the defenses of the 7th Assault Garden, now having a much larger number of sacred swords than before. The civilian representative also says they are prepared and could be evacuated in the midst of chaos if necessary. One of the generals asks if the 7th Assault Garden would be ready to move if needed, and the analyst responds that they have a stability rate of 90%. However, one of the generals doesn't like the idea because the students' abilities are not meant for fleeing from voids, but for engaging them in combat. The leaders then receive a call from the overall commander, who has decided to initiate a new investigation and instructs the leaders not to attack the void until the right moment. They prepare to assemble 3 new elite teams for the new investigation, posting a notice to prepare those involved. Meanwhile, Celia starts training with her new sword, battling training robots, simulating voids. Leonis watches the fight and compliments her fencing skills. Celia explains that she's been training since childhood thanks to her family. However, fighting the training robots isn't helping her improve her combat skills much. Because of this, Leonis has the idea to give Celia more suitable opponents to face. He summons his staff and uses magic to conceal the training field where he and Celia are. Then, Leonis summons a small army of skeletons, which initially startles Celia, as she realizes that the children in this world have never seen a skeleton in their lives. Leonis tells Celia she can defeat as many as she wants. She then takes on the skeletons, defeating several with her sword strikes and acrobatics. As Celia demonstrates her ability to handle the skeletons very well, Leonis summons more of his army to increase the training's difficulty. She manages to handle each of them quite well. However, after eliminating all of them, Celia becomes quite tired and concludes her training for the day, with Leonis storing the skeletons back where they came from. Near the dormitory, Sakuya walks happily after winning her bets, something that hadn't happened in a while. Suddenly, she spots Blackus, Leonis' familiar dog. She's impressed with Blackus' fur quality, and as he doesn't have a collar, she assumes he's a stray dog. Thinking it's just a common animal, since Blackus continues to act like a dog, Sakuya gives him a ridiculous name. She believes the dog liked the name and decides to feed him. Then, she enters the dormitory and says goodbye to Blackus, using the name she gave him. Inside the dormitory, Regina has made sweet potato sweets as it's a day off and she wants to please Leonis. Fina tastes the sweets and says they're delicious. Sakuya then enters and tells them about her new friend she just met, explaining that he's a big dog with fluffy fur, and she named him Furry Iron Blackie. Fina gets to the point and tells them she's following the missing investigation team in the sea, and they haven't returned or communicated for hours. In the meantime, Celia and Leo are out for a motorcycle ride in the city. Nearby, Sherry is working in her new job as a helper in a small market to afford all the food she wants to give Leonis. Sherry's boss asks her to help fry some potatoes, starting with the cutting part. Sherry says the knife he has isn't very sharp and decides to use her own knife. She quickly cuts everything, leaving the potatoes, the bowl, and the cutting board in pieces. Naturally, her boss freaks out and asks her what on earth she was doing, but Sherry doesn't even realize what she did wrong as she had cut the potatoes as he asked. Since it's not a good idea to leave her in charge of preparing the dishes, her boss asks Sherry to clean the front of the store. She complies, but as soon as she reaches the door, she sees Celia and Leonis together. She decides to stop at the market to buy some cakes, telling Leonis not to eat anything yet because they're a gift. This leaves Sherry quite jealous. She secretly spies on the two through the door, wondering where they're going. Celia and Leonis then arrive at a house, and at the same time, a group of children comes running out of the building, happy to see Celia. She explains to Leonis that these children live there as orphans, and the place also serves as a restaurant where she occasionally works part-time. Inside the restaurant, the children have fun, and Celia tells everyone about Leonis. She then mentions that he already has an Excalibur, which surprises everyone as the boy is the same age as them. The boys find Leonis incredible because of this. Celia says she brought donuts and food for everyone. Leonis understands that Celia wants to protect that place because it's important to her, which makes him think that he no longer has a place to protect since his kingdom no longer exists. Meanwhile, the new investigation team dies to gather more information about the supposed void. They arrive at the location where the previous team disappeared, but unfortunately, they can't find any sign of the creature. However, inside the city's tunnels, a worker hears vibrations coming from the underground walls. Finne notices the same on her analysis equipment. Two workers then enter a warehouse filled with roots similar to the ones that attacked the divers. They decide to investigate what it is, and we see a void watching them from among the root branches. Meanwhile, in the restaurant, the children are all happily eating in the company of Celia and Leonis, who is lost in thought, reminiscing about his past. With a brief journey back in time to the period when Leonis was still a young man in his human form, exactly the same as he is now in his current life. This was long before the events of the Great War. This is the walled city on the border of the kingdom of Leonis in the year 428, according to the sacred calendar. And right from the start, these buddies with a trollish look are invading the walled city, bringing a lot of panic and fear to all the people in the city. These guys are quite large. You can see that the houses seem to become small compared to their size. And from a safe distance, there's Leonis with all his youth, along with two other heroes of that time. There's Terrace Resurrected giving an attack order to the staff, Lord Arikal de Gradios, who decides to eliminate the trolls right there within the city walls, even if it means sacrificing the population. They make a deal that Terrace would bring the humans back to life. She agrees and says that people would suffer now, but later they would be alive again and free from the monsters. Arikal's magic begins to take effect in a sort of heatwave to disintegrate everyone when Leonis makes a move with his sword and dissipates Arikal's magic, saying he couldn't bear to see the people suffering. Then he jumps to confront the big guys alone and starts killing the trolls one by one. This scene is pretty cool. He runs on the rooftops, delivering blows and kicks to the trolls, leaping over all of them. Roselia heals him and fills him with skills, preparing the boy for his future mission. His strength truly impresses everyone, and he takes the opportunity to show off as a hero to the population he just saved. The wizard seemed surprised and at the same time had that touch of envy and named him the hero of the sacred sword, prophesying that all of Leonis' power would bring a tragic fate to himself. Then back to the present day, the strange void that had appeared in the underground structures of the 7th Garden of Assault makes its first movements. In the administrative sector of the fortress, where they command and monitor everything, they keep track of the voids for the safety of the area. They discuss what to do about the appearance of a suspicious void. They designate the suspicious target as UK 6402, which seems to keep appearing and disappearing from the radar. The lieutenant requests that the user of Excalibur from the same platoon as Roselia, Finne, be allowed to demonstrate her analysis and monitor the situation closely. The directors are surprised to learn that the girl is a member of an influential family in the decision-making for fortress weapons development. Finney shows the analyses she made of some vibrations coming from underground, and through wave measurements and comparisons of different times and locations, reveals to the commanders that there are disturbances occurring in the vicinity, and everything suggests it is indeed a void. The commanders become nervous, questioning how it managed to enter through the underground. The technical engineers report that there are some possible entry points, but the data in the underground corridors are correct. There is indeed a presence that went unnoticed by the alarm devices. For some reason, they were not triggered. Finney explains that it might be a very clever void that purposefully reduces its energy to remain silent and inconspicuous. And it doesn't take long before the alarm goes off, indicating danger in the area. The technicians believe it's something akin to plant roots. Regina, who is following everything, is trying to contact Roselia, who is unaware of what's happening and is at the Solar House orphanage. Regina is very worried about the news, and Finney wishes that there aren't too many of them. But there's one down there, and she suggests that everyone stay alert together. Meanwhile, life still seems normal outside. Roselia is at the orphanage with the children, who are pestering the little king. It seems that he unintentionally leaves the girls all embarrassed. They still don't know what's going on. The monitoring teams have sent soldiers to see what's happening down there. They send images, and you can see the tangle in the facility's corridors. But apparently, it's a significant problem, and ordinary weapons won't do. Communication with the first agents sent underground was lost. So it's time to think about maybe evacuating the city, or perhaps strengthening the city's defenses. Alert all the authorities to prepare. The rescue team managed to make contact again, but since the thing is like plant roots and moves quickly and easily, it escapes and roams freely through all the underground facility. They discover the true intention of UK 6402, which is to reach the channel that would give access to the magic furnace, a kind of energy generator that powers the entire place. It could reach the magic furnace and use it to generate an explosion, which would be terrible and likely destroy part of the fortress, so security will have to be reinforced there. The defense system starts to act and destroys the initial void attacks. The teams also try to contain this kind of monster with their tentacle-like branches. Despite all the equipment working well and the teams trying to contain it at all costs, it doesn't seem to be enough. Soon, the equipment is damaged. As a result, they lose contact with the capital and won't be able to inform the general commander of the situation. The vice commander is appointed to give orders on what to do from now on. He orders the 7th Garden of Assault to switch to defensive fortress mode, evacuate all inhabitants, and be prepared to face the Lord Void and the possible explosion of the magic furnace. Roselia and Leonis, still unaware of the danger, remain with the children who are pestering Leonis for a demonstration of his Excalibur's power. So he decides to give them a small taste of his magic, but the kids don't seem to like it much. Things are tough down in the fortress installations. Everything is being taken over by the Lord Void's roots or branches. Any sudden movement could accidentally hit the magic furnace, which has finally been completely taken over by the Void. Roselia and Leonis quickly realize that something is wrong, and when they go outside, they are met with dark rifts in the sky from which dozens or hundreds of flying voids emerge. The city goes into protection mode and begins an attack against these bizarre enemies. The emergency alarm is activated to notify the Imperial capital of what is happening in the 7th Garden of Assault, and they hope they send reinforcements. It turns out that it will take 3 days for this help to arrive. The question is whether the fortress will hold out for that long. Here you can see how the city was fully equipped for this type of situation, including to avoid the worst. The energy supply that powers the magic furnace was cut off. They thought of everything to minimize damage. The population is directed into bunkers following safety procedures. What remains now is to rely on the abilities of the students of the Sword Academy, who are now the last hope for everyone to handle this situation. The defense weapons were designed with high technology to withstand these powerful enemies that are now appearing in the form of dragons, and the effects are truly amazing with impressive action. It's a true hail of gunfire everywhere, explosions, and now it's time to go all out. There's no other option. The girls begin to use their weapons and special powers against the invaders. Watching this chaotic scene, Leonis knows that humans will be challenging enemies to defeat. Roselia doesn't think twice and knows she has to keep the children safe in the bunker. Leonis receives a visit, or rather an annoyance, from his somewhat jealous servant, who wishes to protect him, but he quickly sends her away. At that moment, they realize that making the journey to the bunker is no longer safe, so Roselia orders everyone to wait right there and immediately draws her sacred sword. The Demon King feels that she hasn't fully unleashed her potential as the Queen of Vampires and asks if she's afraid. She admits that she is afraid, but fleeing is not an option. The two of them are going to face the voids with all their might. Roselia quickly deals with 2 dragons, while Leonis unleashes fire everywhere. But there's no time to be impressed. The number of monsters keeps increasing, and it makes Leonis recall his past in another era. And now huge creatures resembling ogres appear. The 3 girls are doing their best, but the situation is quite dramatic. It's a sight to behold, with each of them using their abilities to try to destroy as many voids as possible. Succubia with her sword seems to fear nothing, making enormous leaps and destroying the voids one by one. On the other side, Regina with her golden bazooka disintegrates the dragons. However, further away in the smoke, a gigantic void in the form of a hydra or perhaps a multi-headed dragon emerges. The fact is that things are about to get even worse, and it seems to be getting more complicated. But it's beautifully done. The city is under a full-blown attack. Students and machines are trying to handle the situation. However, the dragons are incredibly powerful beings and easily destroy the weapons and buildings. Leonis realizes that the voids have managed to corrupt the dragons and all their powers. This is bad news because it means that common spells won't work to defeat them. So he asks Roselia for help to use a powerful technique. A dilemma arises in Leonis' mind because he realizes that he came back not exactly to protect humans, but to destroy humanity and reclaim his kingdom. However, he decides to stand by the people he now calls family. Leonis invokes his ancient spells with his scepter in hand to direct the attack at the enemies with his powerful technique, these fireballs, that soon turn into a rain of fire. This makes Roselia somewhat scared, but if she stays quiet, nothing will happen to her. As the flames dissipate and the dragon remains unharmed, Leonis realizes that his power doesn't seem to have had much effect. He attributes the reduction in his strength to his limited human body. In an instant, his loyal servant Blackus emerges from below the ground and, like a good watchdog, attacks the huge dragon with a bite to the neck. In a new attempt, the Demon King summons his powers once again and manages to disintegrate the void. But the calm only lasts for a few seconds. The ground begins to shake where the dragon's body fell, and massive rifts in the earth emerge, from which root-like tentacles appear. The Lord Void that had remained underground has entangled Roselia's body with its roots and pulled her into the depths of the crater. Quickly, the creature takes shape and calls Leonis by his name, who at first is surprised but soon realizes that it's an old acquaintance, Arl Cicio. In the year 434 of the Holy Calendar, in the capital of the undead realm, Necrozoa, Leonis steps into his ancient castle. He appears a bit older compared to other flashbacks, with half of his face dominated by his undead form. Leonis has just returned from a battle and finds Roselia at her altar. He recounts a formidable fight against numerous enemies, even dying twice, but that didn't stop him from emerging victorious, because after all, he is the king of the undead. He offers jewels and treasures seized from the defeated palace to Roselia, who accepts with gratitude and asks him to keep the gift. Using his power, he opens 2 portals in the ground and stores the treasures. Roselia is impressed, commenting that he has truly become the Lord of Demons. Leonis reveals that, besides developing a variety of powerful spells, he has also made a new friend, a noble from the Shadow Kingdom named Prince of Shadows Blackus. He refers to his dog servant. Leonis explains that when Blackus got involved in a troublesome dispute, he helped the Shadow people find refuge, even acquiring new abilities. Roselia expresses her desire to give him a gift in celebration of his victory. She reveals Leonis' old sacred sword. However, this sword is no longer suitable for him, as Roselia transformed it into the demon's sword. To wield this sword, Leonis must fulfill a condition he already knows. Returning to the present time, Leonis faces the Lord of the Void, whom he recognizes as his enemy from 1,000 years ago, Arl. He didn't expect this encounter after so long. The Lord of the Void is about to generate more void, and Leonis understands that he is responsible for the stampedes Celia had mentioned earlier. So Leonis grabs his staff and unleashes a fire spell on Arl. However, the creature quickly descends through a crack in the ground, returning to the underground. Leonis is concerned about Celia, but sees on his wrist that the control mark has not disappeared. This means his servant is still alive. He concludes that Arl is trying to lure him into a trap, but he decides to play along and this time will destroy him once and for all. Blackus emerges from the shadows and recognizes that the enemy from 1,000 years ago has returned, but this time very different, as he seems to have become the leader of the Voids. Moreover, Arl's resurrection also means that Roselia should be alive somewhere. They look back and notice the children in front of the orphanage watching. Despite being exposed to the danger of monsters, they observe Leonis awaiting some action. He is used to being watched due to his powers that always scare people even when he was still a human hero. The children thank Leonis for protection, saying they are fine now and ask him to rescue Celia. He is surprised because they are not afraid or repulsed. Instead, they rely on his help. So he promises everyone that he will bring Celia back safely. Leonis invokes an 8th level containment spell, creating a magical protection barrier around the orphanage. Additionally, he summons his cursed elite warriors, 2 skull guards stationed outside to defend the building. Although it is not his obligation to keep them safe, as the Lord of Demons, he cannot ignore a place dear to the heart of one of his servants, as it would tarnish his name. Blackus offers some food he found near the residence. The dog explains that a human gave it to him after he allowed her to stroke his fur. Leonis is hungry, so he takes some to eat. The two find Celia's transmitter earring lying on the ground. Elfin's voice calling for Celia can be heard. On the other side of the city, Sakuria fights against the Hydra-class Void. She cuts off one of the Hydra's heads with her rage and mortal cut. Regina also hits the creature with shots from her sacred sword. Meanwhile, other Ogre-class Voids appear for the battle. Elfine asks for help through the transmitter earring, as they are at a disadvantage. Leonis answers and explains that Celia was kidnapped by the Voids. He asks Elfine to find Celia's location with her tracking abilities. She urges him not to do it, as it is too dangerous to go alone, but Leonis responds that there is no time. So using one of the orbs of her sacred sword, Elfine scans the area and tries to trace Celia's biological signature. She discovers that her friend is trapped in the energy plant block. Distracted, Elfine is about to be hit by one of the Hydra's heads, but suddenly, Sherry saves her with a whip. Underground, Blackus and Leonis run toward the power plant. The dog asks about Sherry, and Leonis explains that he instructed her to save the humans with her abilities because before being employed, she was an assassin, so she shouldn't have problems with monsters. Blackus questions why care for humans when they are about to face one of their 6 heroes. Leonis replies that Elfina's abilities are quite useful and Regina is the servant of his servant. Blackus still doesn't understand the reason for the barrier at the orphanage, and Leonis finally confesses that he has developed an affection for humans. They continue on the path and finally encounter the Lord of the Voids at the energy crystal. Leonis is determined to get his servant back. He then invokes a fire spell and hits Arikal, burning the extent of his branches. However, it doesn't do much damage due to the Lord's regenerative abilities. Arikal expresses indignation, thinking Leonis died 1,000 years ago. The king of the undead realizes that the enemy still possesses the necessary intelligence to speak. He reveals he didn't die, only sealed his soul. Arikal explains that the ancient world no longer exists and the current world will be built together with the Void Star. Leonis asks what the Void Star is, and Arikal only replies that he was chosen to bring good news. Then various voids emerge from the Lord's branches, and Leonis realizes that Arikal assimilated the priests of the Sacred Order. Meanwhile, inside, Celia is trapped, tied by branches all over her body. Leonis communicates with Celia, letting her know he came to save her. Arikal attacks Leonis with his branches, and the boy tries to dodge. Arikal approaches and uses his magic to launch several crystals that cut some of the Lord's branches. With Blackus' help, the dog also uses his powers by emitting fireballs against the adversary, but none of it seems enough. They realize they are out of their element, and their magic is becoming less potent by the second. This is because Arikal dominates the entire area and is draining all the mana from both of them. Arikal invokes an 8th level sacred magic, Lex Magio, releasing cutting beams of light in various directions. Leonis and Blackus try to dodge but are grazed. They combine their magic and fire against the Lord, but he creates a barrier that blocks the attack. The battle is very difficult because Arikal, by draining energy from the mana crystal, has unlimited power. Moreover, he can use multiple spells simultaneously using the assimilated priests. Meanwhile, Celia wants to help Leonis. After all, if she can't fight at that moment, awakening her sacred sword will have been in vain. She wields her sword but still can't cut the branches. Outside, the fight between Arikal and Leonis is frenetic and contested. Blackus and Leonis try to attack together, combining their magic, but the Lord responds with his powers and their attacks are at the same level. Celia is tired of always being taken care of by others and awakens her vampire powers. Using her blood flowing down the walls, sharp blades of blood emerge and break the branches. Taking advantage of the moment, Leonis throws the bloodstained earring at Celia. This unlocks her abilities completely, and her vampire wings appear. Celia is determined to save Leo and the city and finally breaks free from Arikal. Blackus apologizes as he is very tired from the fight and needs time to recover. Leonis thanks the servant and asks him to rest well. Arikal asks what Leonis did to Celia. He replies that he simply provided a bit of his mana-infused blood to his servant. He and Celia meet and hold hands. They begin to fall, but Leonis saves Celia and praises her for developing her vampire powers. She asks about her earring with his blood, and he says she just needed a little push. She thanks him, and now they can finally fight together. Arikal becomes enraged and swears to end them all. With the help of the assimilated priests, he invokes multiple 10th level spells simultaneously, planning to burn the entire city, including himself. Leonis says he will finish the Lord of the Void, but it may take some time. Therefore, Celia needs to keep him safe while he invokes his magic. Celia uses her new vampire powers to distract Arikal's branches, providing cover for Leonis. The only way for Leonis to defeat Arikal is to use his demon sword. However, he remembers Roselia's condition. The sword can only be used to defend Leonis' kingdom, so the undead king draws his sword and claims all that land as his. From that moment on, the 7th Assault Garden will belong to the king of the undead. Therefore, all those who reside there will become subjects, people whom the king has a duty to protect. Leonis then recites the ritual of the demon sword named Leaf. Leonis' decision is acknowledged and he can now use the power of the sword. Arakal is dismayed and asks where he got that sword, and fearfully, he reveals that Leonis cannot change the tragic fate of the world. Wielding the sword, he responds that he will conquer fate with his own hands. Then he uses the secret technique of the kingdom of Rodmus and uses the power of the sword to defeat Arakal, who screams in agony and disappears for good. Outside, the voids one by one vanish. In the central administration of the 7th Assault Garden, they notice that new voids are not appearing and the remaining ones are being eliminated. One of the engineers confirms the disappearance of the biological signature of the Lord of the Voids. The leader wonders what happened to the power plant, and an engineer replies that there was an explosive release of energy, shutting down immediately. They think the Lord of the Voids died when he was involved in the power plant failure and have no idea that it was Leonis who ended him. They thank their luck, and thanks to the combined effort of everyone present, luck smiled on them. In the middle of the city, Leo and Celia emerge from the underground through a sewer cover. The two meet the other members of the 18th Squad, who are very pleased to see them safe, especially Celia. The next day, Leonis is in bed unable to move. He is indignant that a lord of demons is suffering from muscle pain. Celia enters the room bringing a sandwich for the boy. Moreover, she hands him a flower crown that the children from the orphanage made for him. Leonis is contemplative because despite humans being his enemies for years, he claimed them as subjects of his kingdom. Therefore, it is his duty to protect anyone who pays homage to the king of the undead. Then Celia tells him she is hungry because wielding her sacred sword consumes a lot of blood. She asks for some of Leon's blood, which he gives with the condition that she tries to keep control. He extends his index finger, and she sucks on it to feed. Suddenly, the other girls open the door and are shocked by the scene. They came to see if Leo was better and stumbled upon that. Celia is embarrassed and tries to explain that it's not what it looks like. As City suffered greatly from the invasion of the Voids, also called Voids, the place dedicates itself to restoring everything, including the power plant, the source of mana supply, which was also damaged. While the damages are being repaired, the city uses a system to convert sunlight into mana. Although Leonis had claimed that land is his kingdom, there were still many things he was unaware of. So Leonis decides to go to a library for research, but as soon as he reaches the door, he is denied access. A spirit of an owl guarding the entrance explains that to gain access, one needs authorization from the administration office, and to do that, you must submit a request and wait for the response, which is clearly a time-consuming process. At this moment, Regina appears. She explains to Leonis that she went there to return a video software and asks what he was doing there. Leonis invents that he was wanting to research the ancient written language in the ruins where he was found in an attempt to help him recover his memories. That was a convincing reason, and Regina believes in his story, thinking about how difficult it must be to have no memories of one's past. Then she decides to help Leonis. Regina asks for permission from the spirit to enter the place. The owl begins to deny their authorization, but suddenly undergoes some change and authorizes the entry of the two. Inside the library, Leonis asks Regina if she is a medium. She denies it and says she just used a trick on the owl, and asks Leonis not to tell anyone. Later, Regina mentions that the Philip Foundation is the company that manufactures the artificial elementals, that is, the spirits. Leonis wonders how even they were created by humans and asks Regina what happened to the real spirits. She replies that everyone says they practically disappeared when the Void invasion began, although some people say they still roam the ancient forests. Then Regina finds the reference text section for ancient languages and explains to Leonis that he can read in the library or borrow the book. At that moment, the two receive a message from the administration department, stating that some student representatives were invited to the commendation ceremony to be presented by the 4th Imperial Princess, Her Highness Altiris Ray. Regina notes that their whole squad was invited, although the message mentions that very few students received the invitation. Leonis thinks that this is the perfect moment for him to come up with an excuse to ask questions about the higher echelons of the human empire. When Leonis finishes reading the message, he receives a call from Celia asking where he is. She explains that she thought the two would have lunch together, but Leonis says he would meet her after lunch at the port where the ceremony will take place. He then tells Regina that he will go to the port as soon as he finishes his research and that he will meet her and the other girls there, but Regina explains that she does not intend to go to the ceremony and says goodbye to Leonis. Meanwhile, some creatures learn about the ceremony that the Imperial Princess will attend and plan to take advantage of the moment to take her hostage. Everyone was quite confident, but Elsa, a goblin girl, thinks that the sacred swords could become a problem. However, at that moment, help arrives. A black elf arrives saying that she shares the resentment they have towards humans and offers her power to them, explaining that this power surpasses a sacred sword. She gives a small demonstration of her power, resembling a sacred sword, but explains that it is a demonic sword granted by the goddess. The elf says that anyone with the necessary abilities will possess this power in their weapon and demonstrates by lending the power to the lion named Bastia. The wolf named Juror says that with that power, the plan to kidnap the princess to steal the ship will be much easier. Their goal is to sail to the capital to rescue their friends who were imprisoned. However, the elf reveals that her help comes with a small exchange. She explains that her goddess desires a sacrifice, so they must let the sacred swordsman live so that they can be delivered to her. Everyone agrees to the deal, and finally the elf introduces herself. Her name is Sharnak, the Witch of the Eternal Forest. Later, Leonis goes to the port and sees the ship where the ceremony will take place. He thinks that after restoring his demonic army, he can acquire 2 or 3 ships like that. While the ceremony has not started, Leonis decides to buy a gift for Celia. He looks at some jewelry, and the seller shows a bracelet made by an elf in the conservation wing. Leonis is surprised to learn that there are elven members in the city, and the seller explains that in the half-human wing, elves, werewolves, lions, and many other races live. After that, Princess Altiris Ray appears and waves to the population, leaning on the edge. One of her subjects explains that it makes it difficult to keep her safe. The princess apologizes and explains that she leaned to look for someone. Nearby, Regina looks at Altiris Ray through binoculars. Leonis approaches the people who were admiring the princess and assumes that a young princess parading is an easy way to win the population. At that moment, Celia and the other girls arrive, explaining that they were looking for him since they had not set a meeting point. Leonis takes advantage and gives Celia her gift. He explains that it is a way to thank her for everything she has done. After all, the girl had been saved his life, and Celia is super happy and grateful to receive a cat keychain. Then comes the time for everyone aboard the ship, and Leonis asks if Regina really wouldn't show up because she seemed like the kind of person who liked parties and ceremonies. Everyone is at a loss for words, and Celia replies that Regina has her reasons. Next, a girl appears calling for Celia. Her name is Fenris Edelritz. She explains that she was there on behalf of the Executive Council President and says that council members are busy 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, unlike Celia's lazy squad. Fenris provokes her in various ways, and before leaving, she congratulates Celia for awakening her sacred sword with a mocking tone. When she leaves, Leonis asks Celia who the girl was, and she explains that Fenris has been connected to her since they were children. Meanwhile, Juror and Bastia attack 2 ship guards and take their faces, stealing their identities to infiltrate the population. They do this in the part of the ship where security was weaker to avoid being seen, and comment that Sharnak's plan was working perfectly until that moment. Inside the ship, the girls enjoy the ceremony activities while Leonis conducts his research using a copy of reference materials he obtained using a psychography spell. However, as he suspected, it seems that someone was trying to cover up the historical past because there was not a single mention in history of the gods, the 6 heroes, or the goddess of rebellion and the 8 demon lords. Apparently, most of the documents were lost in the Void Invasion, but that seemed too convenient. Leonis also cannot find any details about why magic disappeared and how magical technology was developed. While reflecting on his discoveries or the lack thereof, Leonis drinks a beverage that did not exist in his time and that he liked very much because it was black, a dark color that suited a demon king. Then Sherry appears disguised as a waitress. She had received an order from Leonis to investigate the worship of the ceremony, and that disguise was perfect for her mission. Sherry explains that so far she has discovered that the ship is powered by a mana crystal and its defenses are similar to Assault Garden. She explains that it is equipped with airborne weaponry, including artillery and autocannons. Leonis asks Sherry to continue gathering information, specifically about the ship's control mechanism. Before she leaves, he explains that he has a gift for Sherry. After all, she is his only servant and has been by his side at all times. The girl is very excited and curious to know what Leonis would give her, but she is frustrated to discover that the gift is a simple churro. Next, Celia calls for Leonis. Sherry leaves and he quickly hides his research material. Celia was with the orphanage children and calls Leonis to swim with them. Leonis did not know that the children would be at the ceremony, and Celia explains that Her Highness wants to treat everyone equally, including people from all social classes. The child asks Leonis to swim with them, but he refuses the invitation and explains that the human body was not designed to float in the water, and he does not have swimwear. However, Celia shows that she has a suit for Leonis and says she could teach him to swim. And so, Leonis enters the water, receiving swimming lessons from Celia. The girls in the squad comment that she is a good teacher and explain that it is good for a sacred swordsman to be a good swimmer. However, Leonis was not enjoying it much and feels humiliated seeing that the children know how to swim perfectly, and he does not. Meanwhile, the princess walks toward the place where she would make her speech to everyone when her guards are attacked. She becomes desperate, and Basti and the leopard giraffe discard their disguises. The princess quickly asks her pet to run away. He manages to escape, but Sharnak appears and tells the princess that letting the Master Key escape changes nothing. All the creatures abandon their disguises and take control of the ship, making the entire population hostages. Leonis deduces that they have accomplices and decides to wait for the right moment to act. Fenris tries to summon her Excalibur, but Elsa threatens her not to move, and one of them named Jack places an explosive apple in the middle of the place to keep everyone in their place. Then they collect all the communicators from the people. One of the men asks what they want, and Juro replies that they will rescue their friends from prison. Fenris says the squad does not negotiate with terrorists. This annoys Juro, but Elsa reminds them that they cannot hurt any Excalibur user because they should be sacrifices for the goddess. That information piques Leonis' curiosity. Immediately, he tells Celia that he will look for the princess to see if she is safe and opens a portal on the ground, sneaking away without anyone noticing. Meanwhile, Altiris Ray was trapped and activates the ship's control. She remembers that Sharnak promised to let innocent visitors go. After the elf agrees to the terms, the princess plots the ship's route to the capital. However, if they follow that route, they will be sailing straight into a void reef. Basti asks the princess to change course, but Sharnak refuses to change direction and tells them to let the ship collide with the reef. Basti finds that idea crazy because they will be invaded by the voids. However, she replies that void-tainted sacred swordsman would be a perfect offering to the goddess, showing that she didn't care about their plan to rescue their friends. Basti tries to attack the elf using the power given by her, but her plan fails completely. The weapon not only fails to hurt Sharnak, but also sets fire to the lion until it is completely rid of it. She then demands obedience from the others, making it clear that they should do what she says if they don't want to end up like Bastia. Outside, the guards find it strange that the ship is leaving because it was supposed to leave only the next day. They try to ask the ship to stop while Regina observes the situation. Then she finds the royal carbuncle, and upon touching it, she hears the princess's distress call. The ship starts moving and quickly Regina jumps on it, managing to reach its ladder. Inside, Leonis was lost in the corridors when he sees the spirit of the princess, followed by Regina. He is surprised to meet her on the ship, and Regina explains that her sister is in danger. In a flashback, it's told that on the night Regina was born, a red star shone. It's called Scarlet Calamity and is a symbol of disaster. Therefore, it was a rule that while the star was visible, the royal family's child had to be considered unborn. The king then decided to end the baby who was supposed to be the fourth princess. However, Minister Cristelia learned of the fact and managed to convince the king to only pretend to abandon the baby in the forest so that a relative of his, Mr. Edward, could safely take the baby to his home. Edward and his wife also had a daughter, Celia, and they accepted the rejected princess as their adopted daughter. Thus, Regina grew up having to hide her true identity and became Celia's personal servant. She tells her story to Leonis and says that her true name is Regina Ray, but only the members of Division 18 know about her past. She explains that she went to the ceremony thinking she could see her sister when she encountered the spirit, a member of the royal family, beings endowed with power like spiritual princesses, capable of taking control of the ship. Leonis then explains that the princess was kidnapped by demons, and they also took control of the ballroom, where Celia and the others were looking for an opportunity to escape. So they decide to go in search of the princess to save her, and Regina lets the spirit guide them on the way. Meanwhile, in the ballroom, people were still being held hostage, and Excalibur users couldn't use any weapons, thanks to the demon's bomb placed among the civilians. However, Elphine reveals to Celia that she managed to analyze the bomb's strength thanks to her hidden Excalibur behind the chandelier. She became interested in the ship and directed her Excalibur even before the party started, so none of the enemies noticed her presence. Elphine explains that she realized for the bomb to be activated, Jack had to send a detonation signal through the scepter in his hand, meaning if the signal is blocked, they won't be able to activate the bomb. But the girl tells Celia that her Excalibur can do that for only a second, so she will need help. Celia then thinks of the best way to act, and as she couldn't use her holy sword, decides to use her vampire power. Meanwhile, Regina and Leonis arrive at the ship's cockpit, but the princess was not in any part and the ship's functions were deactivated. Regina thinks that if she could hear the princess one more time, she could know where she is. Leonis then suggests that she should call the princess through the spirit, as Regina, being a member of the royal family, could do that. She says that it's not a good idea because if she does that, her identity could be revealed. However, Leonis reminds her that it's not important at the moment because the priority is to save her sister. Regina realizes that Leonis is right and comments that he is acting like an adult despite his young age. She then manages to communicate with the princess, who wonders how someone could be speaking through the spirit of the royal family. Regina thinks it's better not to reveal her identity and focuses on finding out where the princess is. The girl explains that she is being taken by the demons to the command deck but asks Regina not to worry about her safety and prioritize the ship because the route was directed to the Void's abyss. The princess then explains that Regina should go to the lowest floor to connect the control with the spirit Carbund so they can redirect the ship. She then gives Regina the access code to have everything she needs to fulfill the objective. She then updates Leonis on the current situation, and he decides to save the princess while Regina takes control of the ship. She says that it's very dangerous to do the rescue alone, but Leonis demonstrates his power, making Regina trust in his ability to rescue her sister. Back in the ballroom, Celia controls her blood to reach Jack and asks Elfine to wait for the right moment to attack. However, Fenris couldn't stay quiet and starts asking the creatures to at least let the children go in the lifeboats because the automatic control will take them safely to the city. Juror gets irritated with his request and threatens to attack the girl, but Elsa reminds them that they can't eliminate any of the users of the Holy Sword. However, Juror thinks that losing one or two of them won't be a problem. Suddenly, a plate breaks. Sakuya was calmly getting some food from the ceremony. Juror finds it odd that she's free, and the girl explains that the ropes were hindering her from eating. Elsa notices the clothes Sakuya was wearing and recognizes that she is a warrior, making the demons understand that the girl belongs to the clan known for not loving their own lives and hunting voids mercilessly. Sakuya then challenges Juror to a duel, seeming to enjoy the situation. Fenris questions, saying the wolf should fight her. Juror accepts the challenge and tries to attack the girl, but Fenris dodges the blows and throws him to the ground. Realizing he was stuck, Juror yells for Jack to activate the bomb. Quickly, Elfine blocks the demon's scepter with her Excalibur, and then Celia uses her blood to cut Jack's scepter into pieces. Elsa thinks about acting, but Sakuya is faster and knocks her out. Then Fenris activates her Excalibur, summoning several small creatures that attack Juror while Celia finishes off Jack's scepter, making the bomb disintegrate. And so the girls regain control of the ship and imprison the demons. They grab their equipment, and Celia tries to communicate with Leonis, but doesn't get a response. At that moment, they notice that the ship was entering the Void's abyss. The creatures begin to climb on the ship, and everyone prepares to fight and protect the civilians. After a few attempts, one of the Voids manages to break the glass of the ballroom, and all the creatures invade the place, starting a fight. Celia helps protect the place when suddenly she hears Leonis' voice. He explains that he is communicating through the cat accessory he gave her, and says that now that she is his right hand, she must get used to such things. He then asked about the situation in the ballroom, and Celia explains that she and the girls have already defeated the demons and regained control of the situation, but now the ship was being invaded by the Voids. Leonis knew about the invasion because he was outside attacking the creatures that appeared in front of him. He explains to Celia that Regina is going to the top floor to regain control of the ship and asks her to go help. At that moment, Leonis sees the princess being taken by the elf, Sharnak, to an aircraft. The princess asks where they were taking her, and Sharnak says that there is a group interested in the power of the spirit, and she will be a plaything for those sadistic people. Meanwhile, Regina faces all the Voids in her path so that she can reach the control room when Celia appears with the other girls to help. After defeating all the Voids nearby, an even larger creature appears called Brain Eater. The girls realize that this Void is more powerful than the others and start planning an attack, but Sakuya asks to handle it alone while the others protect the civilians. They leave Sakuya as she requested, and the girl summons a power from her sword called Dark Lightning. Meanwhile, Regina reaches the top floor with Celia's help. She enters the access code, which is basically Scarlet Calamity, the name of the red star that, according to the princess, she must remember. And so, through the spirit, Regina manages to redirect the ship away from the Voids. Outside, Sharnak prepares to escape with the princess, leaving the leopard behind. He pleads for help but is attacked by the Voids behind him. The princess then sees that the ship was changing course and is relieved to know that the girl who communicated with her through the spirit managed to save the people. The helicopter starts flying, but before it could leave, Leonis' power pulls the aircraft down. Meanwhile, in the ballroom, Elfine and Fenris face the Voids to protect the civilians, but there were more creatures than the two could handle. However, just when the situation tightens, Sherry appears and easily defeats the Voids, disappearing afterwards with her teleportation. Meanwhile, Sakuya finishes dealing with the Void in the ship's corridor, and Leonis talks to Sharnak. He tells her that he is the Demon King, but she gets irritated with a child like him mentioning the name of her king, not believing what Leonis says. She tries to cast a spell, but it is blocked, and Leonis explains that it is a basic magic he developed himself, so he couldn't attack his own creator. Leonis attacks the elf and asks what her true goal was. She says she wants to eliminate the Excalibur users and create the demon's sword because it is the will of the goddesses. He then asks who the goddess she is mentioning is, but before Sharnak could answer, her body is taken over by a void. Leonis recognizes the creature as the Demon King's killer weapon, an exterminating sword called Zolgstar Mezekis, which succumbed to madness and turned into a Void Lord. Leonis launches an attack, but the creature is resistant to magic and continued with this ability even after becoming a Void Lord. The Void uses space teleportation and tries to hit Leonis, who has to protect himself and at the same time protect the princess. Fortunately, Regina sees the boy's situation through a camera and uses the ship's control to activate her defense equipment. The weapons quickly destroy all the voids and then focus all the ship's force on the Void Lord. The creature is bombarded and Celia arrives, explaining to Leonis that Regina told her the fastest way to get to him. Then more voids arrive on the ship and Leonis asks Celia to buy time for him. The girl then begins to fight against the creatures using her Excalibur and her vampire power while Leonis takes his demon sword. And so he manages to put an end to the Void Lord. After the ship is saved and out of danger, the princess thanks the girls for everything they did. Then she asks where the boy who saved her is, but she discovers that Leonis was not feeling well and therefore returned home early. Afterward, the princess asks which of them managed to change the ship's course because she also wanted to thank her. Celia explains that Regina couldn't be there but left a message for the princess. The girl then conveys Regina's message, saying that she is very happy that the princess is safe and wishes her all the best. In his room, Leonis complains about the pain in his body and regrets not having obtained information about the goddess that the elf mentioned. At that moment, Regina appears and says that she made an apple pie for him to eat. Leonis questions, saying that he can eat alone, but Regina says that she just wanted to pamper the boy a little. He then asks if she was sure she didn't want to find her sister, and Regina says yes, because she at least managed to talk to her a bit through the spirit and thanks Leonis for the help. In a vast forest covered by several domes, a group of bandits is in a bunker, fleeing toward the port. However, soldiers from the Empire who were chasing them capture the gang, accusing them of being accomplices to extremists since they kidnapped the ship and the princess. Before the bandits can react, a soldier warns them that they would be no match for the power of Excalibur. Then a mysterious figure appears, petrifying all the soldiers, after demonstrating immense power. Compelling the terrorists to kneel with the demon's eye, the group of bandits surrenders to such force. The figure introduces itself as Zorbatis, the Demon King, the true ruler of the world, and forces the gang to serve him. The gang's leader reveals that they are the remnants of the Severan Wolves and swear allegiance to Zorbatis. The Demon King opens a magical underground portal, invisible to humans, and orders the group to use it as their headquarters, instructing them to cease fighting against the Empire. Comically, Zorbatis' cell phone rings, and upon answering, a woman seems to argue with him about something. Embarrassed, he hangs up the phone, forces an evil laugh, and disappears through a portal. In her room, Celia wakes up and notices that birds are gathering around her more and more. She recalls Leonis saying once that nocturnal animals like to gather around a vampire. She leaves the room in search of Leonis but encounters Sherry. She rubs her eyes and the other girl simply disappears, leading Celia to realize that there's no one else in the room. She calls the boy and scolds him for disappearing, but he hangs up on her. She says she'll take a shower and then go in search of her friend. While she showers, Leonis returns to his room in his Zombatis costume and complains that his family members are getting a bit too possessive, and that call almost robbed him of his dignity. Despite the blunder, Leonis managed to accomplish his mission, which was to control the radical agent survivors. He plans to use the gang as a foundation for the revival of the demonic army. Leonis enters Celia's room without knocking and faces the girl changing, making him turn away immediately and apologize. Regina arrives with breakfast and upon seeing the scene, asks if she's interrupting something. Embarrassed, both answer negatively. Having breakfast, Celia advises Leonis to eat vegetables to stay healthy, but the boy says he'll eat later. He thinks to himself that the dead don't care about health, but quickly assumes it's a plan of the girl to thin his blood, making it easier to be sucked later. Regina sees a bird passing by the window and asks if she can shoo them away, making a gun sign with her hands. Celia replies that she wouldn't like that because they are cute, but Regina complains that this house already has a reputation for being haunted enough. She've heard stories from the dormitory about a big black dog and a ghost girl wandering around. Celia says she saw that girl, and she wore a maid outfit, had short hair, and was looking for Leonis. Leonis realizes what they were talking about and chokes, trying to avoid the subject, saying that Celia must have been mistaken. Inside, he complains to Sherry for being so careless. Speaking of which, Celia asks where Leonis was, and he invents that he was training for today's combat training. Regina praises the boy's false motivation, and he finishes by saying that he wants to give his best to help Celia, making the girl embarrassed by his words. Regina says that the Fenris platoon is strong, but she stayed up all night plotting the strategy, so they need to win and climb the ranks. Celia is motivated because this will be her first combat after receiving her Excalibur. In the combat training, Celia and Leonis advance on the enemy territory but are shot with arrows. Leonis manages to stop the arrows with his magic, and Celia cuts one of the enemy flags, earning applause from the arena audience for the Peloton 18's achievement. Celia warns Regina that an enemy is approaching Flag 3. Regina is in ambush in a tree and tries to hit the target but misses the shots. Celia informs that 2 more attackers are approaching from 2 and 3 o'clock, and Regina shoots again. Nearby, Sakuya fights some ice wolves, and the Empire's higher-ranking officers discuss the event, commenting that defense must be done cautiously from a distance. Fighters in close combat must advance through the center, causing a distraction so the platoon leader can go after the flags. Everyone must position themselves according to their abilities, and if the distraction in the center fails, the whole group will fail. Trying to advance, Celia is injured in the leg by an ice wolf, and Fenris appears, laughing at the situation. The vampire asks if her opponent has changed powers, and Fenris replies that she adjusted according to the combat rules. Fenris is the platoon leader and should be assuming a more strategic position, but she made plans just to settle her grudge with Celia. Besides, she was also managing to hit Sakuya at the same time. As good as Sakuya is with the sword, she gets confused when surrounded and must be distracted with the ice wolves. Fenris sent 2 people after the 18th platoon's main flag, claiming that Elfine and her servant are overwhelmed fighting 2 at once. Leonis thinks that this girl is unpleasant but intelligent. Fenris knows that by defeating the leaders of the enemy platoon, she will win the training. She is betting on a maximum attack on the enemy leaders, which means their main flag is vulnerable. Just as she can win the mission in that fight alone, she can also jeopardize the 11th platoon if she is defeated at that moment. Fenris manages to freeze Celia's arms to a tree, but Leonis defeats the other opponent with magical strangulation. Celia frees herself from the freezing by heating her body with her Excalibur and counterattacks. She strikes Fenris' icy fists forcefully and defeats her. The officers comment that this wouldn't have happened if the 11th platoon had attacked the enemy's main flag directly, and it's worth watching this training, but the fighters are still naive. The old man comments that perhaps it's this naivety that attracts people to watch the combat. After the victory, the girls from the platoon are bathing with Leonis, who says he could be bathing alone. They explain that the school allows guardians to bathe with them up to the age of 10, regardless of gender. Meanwhile, Regina plays with Sakuya in the middle of the bath, catching Leonis' attention. The girls discuss the earlier combat, and Celia analyzes that if Fenris wasn't obsessed with her, they wouldn't have won. Sakuya apologizes for falling easily into the enemy's trap, and Elfine consoles the leader, saying that she managed to defeat the opponent aiming for their main flag. Celia responds with another compliment, ensuring that Sakuya has much room for improvement. After that victory, the 18th platoon tightened their bonds even more and evolved as a team. Far away, a man draws a sword from the ground, claiming that this demonic sword has already produced the victim of Excalibur. While reflecting that Sharnak did a good job, he is curious about what defeated her. His name is revealed as Nefekis, a lord of the voids. He reveals that soon it will be time to resurrect the prophecy goddess, and the scene shows a giant winged creature, apparently dormant. A portal opens, and a magical cloud hovers over an unknown fortress city. Back at the 7th Assault Garden, the 18th platoon is urgently summoned because a surveillance drone to the northwest has revealed the 3rd Assault Garden, which disappeared 6 years ago due to the void. It is the destroyed homeland of Roselia and Regina, and this fortress is rapidly moving in their direction. There's a chance the magic cauldron that died there has revived, and if it continues at this speed, the 3rd Assault Garden may collide with the 7th in a week. A strange detail is that there were 2 emergency signals, which could indicate that someone is alive in that location. Therefore, the 72nd platoon is given 72 hours to investigate the magic cauldron and rescue possible survivors. If a team fails within this time frame, the fortress won't be able to avoid collision in time. Elfine asks why the 18th platoon received this mission, assuming it has to do with the fact that the target is the homeland of some team members, and the inspector admits that this is the reason. As the mission involves an emotional aspect, Leonis reflects that humanity loves creating its heroes, and that hasn't changed since he was recognized as one. Celia asks Leonis to be excused from the mission, but he insists on going along, considering himself an official member of the 18th platoon. The girl is excited by her partner's honorable attitude and promises to protect him. The team is released for medical examinations and prepares to depart. Before the takeoff of the platoon, Leonis reveals information to Blackus and Sherry, claiming to have seen the holy cult flag in a deserted city far away. The wolf finds it strange because the traces of the cult disappeared completely 1,000 years ago, so Leonis promises to investigate the matter. Blackus commits to protecting the kingdom while Leonis is on a mission. Sherry, on the other hand, receives orders from the Demon King to follow him on his mission. Curious, Leonis asks Blackus why he's wearing that tie, and he replies that it was a gift from Sakuya, so he wouldn't be mistaken for a stray dog and kicked out of the city, making the boy wonder how a noble of the kingdom can accept being treated like that. Stu from the 18th platoon departs, and during the flight, Regina invites Leonis to sleep on her lap, but Celia starts a fight with her, wanting the boy to sleep on her lap too. Leonis tries to calm the situation, but Regina takes a cotton swab and pulls the boy's head onto her lap, cleaning his ear and making him fall asleep quickly. In the midst of this, in an old memory of Leonis, the Demon King is cleaning his weapon next to his queen, explaining that someone like him cannot appear with any dirt as it would tarnish his dignity. The queen reveals that their time together is ending, and the Demon King is upset, saying that their kingdom had just been created. The woman explains that she will disappear and reincarnate in 1,000 years, asking the king to find her no matter how she is in that future. He promises to find his beloved even if he has to travel to the ends of the earth to find her, ensuring that the promises of the Demon King are always kept. Then she asks him to fulfill one more promise if she becomes a different creature in the future, but this request was not revealed, bringing us back to the present moment in the platoon's helicopter. Leonis wakes up on Celia's lap, who says she switched places with Regina, while the friend informs that they are already arriving. The top view was impaired by the sea fog, but the team lands successfully. The group splits into two, with Celia and Leonis in charge of checking the magic cauldron, while the rest of the group should investigate the origin of the emergency signal. Elfine informs that her team will start searching for the food protection center and, as a precaution, leaves one of her Excaliburs with Celia. Leonis summons Sherry and orders her to accompany the other group. The servant questions if she wasn't there to protect him, but the boy reminds her that he is the Demon King and claims he doesn't need protection. He finishes by saying that he doesn't consider those girls as family, but as servants. While walking, Celia is stopped by memories of that place. She points to an old cafeteria far away where her father used to take her to eat delicious cakes. Next to it, she remembers an old supermarket, but everything had been devastated while she only prayed in a bunker. Leonis tries to console his friend because it wasn't her fault, but the two are hit by a bolt from the sky. They manage to dodge the attack, but another shot hits a column, which falls on Celia. Leonis looks up and notices a giant winged enemy approaching. Sometime before, an elf appears in the city. Just like Leonis, she came from 1,000 years ago, and upon seeing the entire place destroyed with no sign of life, wonders what happened to the world. The elf is named Arl Cicio and is a heroine from her time. She enters a women's clothing store and puts together an outfit to wear. Next, Arl thinks she must have been sent to that place because it's where the goddess will resurface. She notices that the city is in motion when she sees a helicopter. The elf thinks it's a dragon in a strange form, but Nephicus suddenly appears and explains that what she's seeing is just a human vehicle. He expresses surprise at encountering Arl, showing knowledge of her identity, and introduces himself as Nephicus Void Lord. However, the elf says she's not interested in his name, but in how he knows her. Arl asks if he also came from 1,000 years ago, and Nephicus responds it's something like that, although their objectives are quite different. She came there to destroy the goddess's vessel with the demolishing sword Krozax, while he is the guardian of that vessel. Upon discovering her enemy, Arl tries to attack Nephicus, but he manages to dodge the blow and hides in the mist. Suddenly, the elf notices a winged creature right behind her, the same one attacking Leonis and Celia in the present. The Void prepares to launch another attack on Celia, but Leonis uses his magic to move the girl out of the way just in time to prevent the attack from hitting her, taking her to another location and placing her safely on the ground. The Void launches an attack in Leonis' direction, destroying Elfina's Excalibur. However, the boy uses a shield to protect himself and then attacks with a spell. Yet he discovers that the Void has a sacred protection capable of repelling powerful magic, indicating that the winged creature is a fallen angel turned Void. Nonetheless, the Demon King remains confident and determined to show the creature what true grand magic is. Nearby, the three girls from the squad see the attacks from afar and realize they're coming from the direction where Leonis and Celia are. Elfin also notices that the Excalibur she left with Celia has disappeared, and the three decide to go there to see what's happening. Back to Leonis, the boy dodges and blocks all the Void's attacks and then unleashes a powerful spell that throws the creature to the ground. Leonis seizes the moment to continue attacking with more spells, leaving the Void in despair. To finish it off, the boy casts another spell, causing a lightning bolt to fall right on the winged creature, destroying it completely. Then he goes to Celia, where the girl remains lying on the ground too weak to get up. Seeing Leonis, she asks if everything's okay, and he tells her he managed to defeat the opponent, despite their strength. Celia tries to get up, but Leonis advises her not to strain herself, stating that even the vampire queen needs time to heal serious wounds. The boy then thinks that the priority at that moment is to find a safe place for Celia to rest, because where they are, voids could appear at any moment. Suddenly, they see something approaching and Leonis prepares to attack, but Celia tells him not to, recognizing that one of the figures is wearing the Duke's emblem. They were spirits, and one of them, named William, explains that they are the ancient knights of Crystalia, the subordinates of Celia's father. He introduces himself and says that, although they became spirits, they came to serve her. Leo knew that resentful spirits often roam old battlefields, but notes that despite seeing many of them 1,000 years ago, it was the first time he witnessed spirits like those in the current era. William deduces that Celia was there because of the emergency signal they sent, explaining that it wasn't a request for help but a way to convey a message. If they don't act quickly, the incident from 6 years ago may repeat because a new Void Lord has appeared and will surely devastate the 7th Assault Garden. William explains that they can manifest due to the influence of this Void Lord, and Leonis thinks that is indeed possible, even though it didn't happen when the Void Lord Arakiel appeared, wondering why. William continues explaining that the Void is hidden in the city's magic furnace, accumulating power and will surely emerge soon. Celia says they need to act immediately, but she was too injured to do anything. The vampire thinks of passing on that information, but Leonis finds it impossible for people of that era to believe information given by ghosts. The boy then says that first they need to find a quiet place to rest, and William offers to take them to his house, explaining that the spirits prepared a car to transport Celia, since they knew she would appear. She asks how ghosts can drive a car, and Leonis explains that spirits are magical energy without a physical body, so if the vehicle is a magical device, they can operate it. However, Leonis also knows that the vehicle is very slow, so he summons a giant two-headed skeleton horse to pull the car like a carriage, taking them at super fast speed. Meanwhile, the three girls arrive where Celia and Leonis were, and as everything is quiet, they deduce that the fight had already ended. Suddenly, Sakuya sees a hidden girl. Regina is glad to see a survivor and approaches the stranger, but luckily, Sakuya stops her from getting too close, saving Regina from a blow from the girl, who turns out to be Elf Arl. Sakuya realizes that the stranger is strong and asks the other two to let her handle the situation. Regina asks Arl if she fired the emergency signal, but the elf refuses to answer and attacks Sakuya, thinking they were with Nephicus. The two engage in a duel, and despite the elf's skill, she ends up losing. However, Sakuya gives up, continuing the duel when she sees that her opponent is injured and unable to give her best. Nearby, the one responsible for her injury, Nephicus, celebrates that everything is going as planned, and we see a mysterious creature unconscious with him. Back to Leonis' makeshift cart, Celia notices her pain diminishing. However, somewhat awkwardly, she asks to drink a bit of the boy's blood. He understands that Celia must have spent her energy healing and prepares to offer his arm for her to feed, but the vampire, Ravenous, attacks his neck instead. Leonis thinks that if he lets this continue, he might end up dead and tries to stop Celia with a familiar master spell, but to no avail. Suddenly, Elphine starts communicating with Celia through the communicator, causing the girl to stop feeding. Elphine reveals she noticed they had to fight against the Void and asks if Celia and Leonis are okay. Celia explains the Void has been defeated. She got injured a bit but is recovering, and thus the injury won't hinder their plans. On the other hand, Leonis is quite direct, explaining he almost died but is alive thanks to Elphine, referring to the attack he endured from the vampire. Elphine is puzzled, but despite that, Celia scolds the boy for being so honest. The girl then informs Elphine that a Void Lord may be in the city, possibly causing the magical furnace to reactivate. She and Leonis are heading to investigate. Elphine also mentions their plan to go to the central garden after taking care of a survivor they found. Celia is surprised they found the survivor, but Elphine says she'll explain later, and they arrange to meet at the Crystalia residence. After Celia ends the call, Leonis tells her that if she sucked too much of his blood, he could die. The vampire apologizes, explaining she was a bit dizzy, but asks if she can feed a bit more. Immediately, Leonis stops her, saying he has something to give her. He shows her a dress, explaining it's an ancestral garment that can convert the magical energy of the vampire queen to strengthen her physical body. This would allow Celia's power to increase, but it would also rapidly drain her magical energy, so she should be careful when using it. Celia absorbs the dress, and Leonis explains that when she wants to use it, she just needs to imagine putting it on. Celia then asks why Leonis was giving her the dress at that moment. The boy responds that, although he thought it might be too early, one never knows what will happen. After all, she had just been injured and doesn't want that to happen again. Celia is pleased to see Leonis' concern for her safety, and he then gives her a skeleton pendant, saying it's a kind of amulet for her. Meanwhile, Regina finishes bandaging Arl's wound, and Sakuya found a similar outfit for her to wear. They introduce themselves, and the girls inquire why Arl attacked them suddenly. The elf explains that she thought they were allies of the monster controller, revealing she was injured in a fight with one of them. Elfinit quickly checks and finds no information about Arl in the third Assault Garden database. She asks where Arl comes from, and Arl wants to know what the three were doing in that place. Elfinit explains they are a 7th Assault Garden investigation team, sent to explore the city destroyed 6 years ago that suddenly became active again. With this information, Arl realizes that humanity still exists. Elfin then says she answered Arl's question and asks her to do the same. Arl explains she was there to fulfill her mission, which basically involves killing the goddess. The girls don't understand what she's talking about, and Arl realizes that no one in that era remembers the legend as 1,000 years have passed. She thanks the three for taking care of her wounds and explains she realized they are not with the enemy. Still, she needs to move on. The girls insist she stays a bit longer to recover and eat, feeling responsible for protecting Arl. Hungry, the elf agrees to eat a bit. Meanwhile, she is observed by Sherry, who recognizes Arl as the swordsman of the 6 heroes and Shardark's best student. Arl has sought the Demon King and has eliminated several leaders of his army, having invaded Deathhold 3 times. Sherry wonders what the elf is doing in that era. Back to Nephicus, he celebrates that after waiting for 1,000 years, he is about to resurrect the goddess, the only creature to overthrow the gods of light. At that moment, one of the voids appears and Nephicus discovers the other one was defeated. He wonders if the elf was responsible for it or if it was some Excalibur bearer, finding it hard to believe that a human could have defeated the creature. Meanwhile, Leonis and Celia finally arrive at the destination where she can finish recovering. The girl recognizes the place surrounded by memories of her past with her family. They enter a house and Leonis sees a chair. He decides to sit, and the comfort of the chair makes him remember his throne, immersing him in memories of his past, back when he had to clean his skeletons. Celia climbs the stairs guided by the spirits and is moved to see that she's in her father's library. She starts crying and the spirits take the opportunity to give her another memory. They make the whole place look like it was before the incident, and Celia sees a moment she had with her father when he told one of the stories he used to share with her. The story was about a hero and an evil demon king living in a castle of bones. It told how the hero managed to defeat the demon king with the power of the gods, allowing humans to live in peace. However, Celia's father explains he doesn't know if that story had really come to an end. Suddenly, Nephicus appears, shattering the entire illusion of the moment. Celia asks if he is a survivor, but this offends Nephicus, being mistaken for a human for the first time. He says that because of this mistake, she must pay and then launches a fire spell at her. Leonis, still lost in memories of his past, immediately realizes something is wrong, but the vampire is already unconscious upstairs. As flames engulf the area, Celia, unconscious, begins to recall her last conversation with her father before she evacuated to the shelter, and he went out to protect the 3rd Assault Garden from the voids. The girl wanted to join her father, Edward, and fight alongside her family, but he reminded Celia that they had a duty to fight to protect the people, and she could be a part of that task, fighting with them once she awakened her Excalibur. Still, the girl remains disheartened because she wanted to go with her father. To uplift his daughter, Edward reminds her of the fairy tale about the evil Demon King and explains that he believes the story has some truth to it. Despite the king being evil, he thinks the Demon King will appear in their world just when people need their help the most to defeat the voids. After recalling the conversation, Celia begins to awaken and sees 3 undead in front of her. Nephicus thinks he went overboard casting a level 3 spell on a human capable of toppling a giant. However, the smoke in the area moves and he spots the skeletons, wondering who summoned the 3. They pledge to protect Celia and are delighted to see that they arrived just in time to help, while Nephicus prepares to cast a level 6 spell to test their defensive capabilities. At that moment, Leonis appears and casts a spell on Nephicus, completely forgetting to hold back. Celia then asks him who the 3 skeletons are, and Leonis explains that they are the keychain he gave her earlier, along with the dress of the true ancestor, a lucky charm specially made to summon the undead. The 3 then introduce themselves as Emilus, a swordsman from the 9th Circle, Dorug, a champion of hell, and finally Nephizgal, a mage from the spirit world. Together, they are the 3 heroic warriors of Ragnas. After introducing themselves, they start arguing about who protected Celia better, trying to please their master, Leonis. The boy begins to reprimand the 3, but suddenly Nephicus rises and Leonis is surprised to finally identify his opponent and see that he survived his attack. Nefekis acknowledges the power of Leonis' magic. If he were just a human, he would have turned to ashes. Since he isn't, the attack wasn't nearly strong enough to cause any damage. Next, Nefekis casts a fireball at them. The undead quickly move in front of Celia to protect the girl, while Leonis steps in front of everyone and casts an ice spell strong enough to defeat Nefekis' flames, leaving him astonished at being surpassed. Nefekis asks the boy who he is, but Leonis says he will answer first what exactly his goal is. Suddenly, an earthquake shakes everything and Nefekis starts laughing, irritating Leonis. He says that Saint Tyrus played her part and devoured the offerings, and the almighty goddess has returned to life, meaning his services are no longer needed. Then Nefekis opens a portal and starts to leave. Leonis tries to stop him by summoning the Hand of Death from the realm of shadows, but Nefekis manages to leave, saying that the world is destined to crumble at the hands of the goddess, and leaves Leonis without answers. Without understanding a thing about what was happening, the demon recalls having seen Nefekis a millennium ago, and that he's a follower of Azrael, the lord of the underworld, who participated in the assembly of the 8 demon lords several times. But now that he has seen him again, Leonis wonders what Nefekis was doing there, which god he was referring to, pondering if it could be his beloved Roselia. Suddenly, a light appears, and Leonis recognizes the shape illuminating the clouds as the symbol of the sacred order, a testament to the past when humanity revered the gods, having a strong connection to Tyrus. Quickly, everyone flees the building, and outside they see a massive void rising. The spirits of the ancient knights of Crystalia reappear, and William explains that it is the Lord of the Voids he mentioned before to Celia, and asks the girl to go to a safe place. Various winged creatures fly near the Lord of the Voids and begin to sing. Leonis recognizes that it is the hymn of the sacred order and realizes that the Lord of the Voids is the Saint Tyrus Resurrected, one of the 6 heroes who faced the Demon King and his army 1,000 years ago. Nearby, Regina notices that a creature similar to the Lord of the Voids appeared in the middle of the city and mourns the other girls in her squad. Elphine tries to communicate with Celia again but gets no response, while Sakuya asks the elf Arl to stay hidden for safety. And so as Celia, Leonis, and the undead prepare to fight against countless winged creatures and the Lord of the Voids, Elphine calls for reinforcements through her Excalibur and recommends they evacuate the 7th Assault Garden, hoping everyone has enough time for it. However, given the circumstances, they couldn't simply retreat and go back home, leaving only the option to meet with Celia and Leonis and defeat the Lord of the Voids. But for that, they need transportation to reach the 2. So Elphine thinks of tracking a vehicle with her drones to locate them. Suddenly, the place is invaded by several winged voids. Regina and Sakuya prepare to fight, while the elf remains hidden and feels that the goddess has returned. Meanwhile, Celia and Leonis, along with the 3 heroic warriors of Rodnes, fight against various voids, but the creatures regenerate quickly no matter the blow they deliver. The same happens with the group of other girls. They all struggle to face the creatures thanks to their regeneration, and Elphine uses her Excalibur to analyze one of the voids, trying to find a weak point. And so Elphine discovers through her analysis that to defeat the voids, it was necessary to aim for their heads, making the battle easier for the squad. At the same time, Leonis hits one of the creatures with his magic and realizes that hitting the head causes the void to completely dissipate, identifying their weak point. The demon then remembers that Tyrus was endowed with the power to restore life and deduces that even after becoming the Lord of the Void, she probably still has a similar ability, being the reason for the creature's regeneration. But knowing how to defeat the voids, Leonis easily eliminates many of them, and the 3 heroic warriors of Rodnes strive not to fall behind, attacking various creatures quickly. But no matter how many they defeat, more voids appear and move towards them. Back to the girls, Elphine locates a vehicle with her Excalibur and explains to her friends that she will need cover while disabling the vehicle's authentication lock. And so the 3 leave the building where they were taking shelter, and the elf follows them, still injured and having difficulty walking. Meanwhile, the undead are having a good time, even though they realize they have a lot of hard work ahead. For them, this is the moment when the battlefield is worth it. Celia also faces the winged voids with her sacred sword, while Leonis defeats several of them with his fireball and manages to get closer to Tyrus, thinking that this is the only way to end that endless fight. He summons a level 10 spell, creating a ball of light that begins to grow and illuminate everything around it as it approaches the Lord of the Voids. As soon as the ball of light reaches Tyrus, it starts burning and melting instantly. However, shortly after, the goddess resists the spell and begins to regenerate. Then she prepares to cast a powerful spell, and the demon and the 3 undead prepare to shield themselves from the attack. Tyrus casts her spell, throwing countless fireballs that destroy everything in the area, including some voids. However, Leonis and the others remain safe, thanks to a protective barrier. The elf observes the situation from afar and recognizes that the fireballs are a level 11 spell that causes mass destruction called Eonemesis. At the same time, the girls wonder what is happening in the center of the city and decide to focus on acquiring the vehicle. After the spell ends, many winged voids advance towards the group. Leonis then asks Celia to cover him so that he can approach the Lord of the Voids and put an end to the battle. The three undead say they will help her cover the demon, and the vampire cuts her blood to obtain her wings, preparing for the fight. Together with the three heroic warriors of Ragnas, they manage to eliminate several voids while Leonis approaches Terrace and begins to summon the power of his demonic sword to attack her. However, the demon cannot complete his strike and realizes that his sword is resonating. Suddenly, the goddess asks if he intends to kill her with the demonic sword, and Leonis realizes that the voice is that of Roselia, becoming confused as to why the Lord of the Voids has the voice of his beloved. Leonis thinks it must be a mistake and gathers strength to finalize his attack with his demonic sword, but Terrace blocks his blow and then prepares to launch several arrows. She releases all the arrows at once, hitting several voids and scratching Celia, but one of them hits Leonis in the chest. The boy falls to the ground wounded, leaving Celia and the three undead worried. The vampire doesn't know what to do but decides to attack the Lord of the Voids. She puts on the dress of the true ancestor for the first time and casts a powerful spell on Terrace, causing her to fall with the attack. The undead continue to attack the Voids to protect the Demon King, and Celia flies to the boy. Still unconscious, Leonis begins to remember the conversation he had with Roselia, where she told him that she would disappear and reincarnate in 1,000 years. And he gave his word as a demon king that he would find her, even if it meant searching every corner of the world. At that moment, Leonis wakes up and sees Celia by his side. He thinks it's his fault that the girl has become his servant and that the vampire must survive at all costs. However, to escape with her life, she must take every drop of his blood to recover her energy, showing that at that moment, he didn't care about giving his life to save Celia. Leonis faints again and finally remembers the rest of the conversation he had with Roselia. His queen had said that if, in the future, she ended up transforming into something completely different, he should end her life with his demonic sword. Such was her request. Recalling his queen's wish, the boy begins to ponder that if Roselia had indeed been corrupted by the voids, it made no sense for him to be brought back after 1,000 years. If his beloved Roselia wasn't herself anymore, there was no longer any reason for him to be there. While Leonis reflects on whether Roselia has been corrupted or not, Celia starts healing him with her vampire magic. The demon remembers denying Roselia's request, even though it was what she would have wanted, because he could never end the life of his beloved. Understanding his reasons, the woman makes Leonis forget that they had that conversation, but tells him that when the time comes, he must remember her requests and meet the true Roselia, trusting that the demonic sword she gave him will guide him to his destiny. With this, Leonis realizes that he wasn't just dreaming, but recalling a memory that Roselia had sealed for him to remember only when needed. And so after Leonis recalled the desire of his queen, he wakes up determined to eliminate the Lord of Voids, trusting that if the demonic sword were to guide him to his destiny, it couldn't harm the true Roselia. The demon rises and Celia asks if he's feeling better. Leonis explains that his wounds healed after she shared her blood, and thanks to that, his life was saved. He then thinks that Celia absorbing his mana several times by feeding on his blood and returning it to his body must have triggered the release of the sealed memories of his past. The three undead ask their master to take some time to recover. Leonis then asks for a piece of Celia's dress lining. The vampire tears a piece of her clothing and hands it to the boy. He places the lining on his wound, absorbing it and recovering. At this moment, the goddess begins to rise, and Leonis notices that the power of his sword diminishes a bit, although it hasn't depleted all its mana. William then asks the boy to use the souls of the spirits, explaining that he has noticed his exceptional talent capable of more than just spells, and he assumed the boy had magical power to convert their souls into a source of energy. Leonis confirms that he can indeed do that, and the spirits say that if they weren't enough, the boy can use all the souls of the city's citizens because they also desire a chance for revenge. With this, Leonis understands that the resurrection ability of the goddess Tiras gave the knights souls in astral form, causing them to start wandering the city as ghosts after her awakening. William pleads with Leonis to grant their last wish, and the boy agrees to take responsibility for all the souls and fulfill their wishes. He then summons a spell with his demonic sword, creating a dark red ball that attracts the souls of the city's citizens. William is grateful but says the knights will also help. However, Leonis says he has a more suitable task for them. The demon summons several underworld skeleton soldiers and fits them into the spirits, giving the knights a new body and the ability to fight again. Then Leonis asks Celia to lead the knights into battle, explaining that it will take some time to gather the necessary energy in the demonic sword to defeat the Lord Void. During this period, he will be completely defenseless, making it clear that he's placing his life in the hands of the vampire. Celia uses her magic and grants spears to her army of skeletons, instructing everyone to follow her command. Meanwhile, Elphine finally manages to deactivate the authentication lock on the vehicles so that she and the other girls can reach the Void Lord. At this moment, Arl appears and asks to go with them to the battlefield. Regina suggests that as she is still recovering, it would be better for her to stay hidden. Suddenly, a creature appears and the elf easily dispatches it. She says she swore to defeat her enemies and her sword, the demon exterminator, has the power needed for this task. Sakuya realizes that Arl is not willing to give up and asks Elphine to let the elf go along, promising that if things get complicated, she will keep her safe. And so while Celia leads her army effortlessly, everyone facing the voids with great determination, Leonis absorbs the souls he needs to defeat the goddess, and Arl and the girls hurry to reach the Void Lord. However, in the middle of the journey, they find themselves surrounded by the voids. Elphine quickly takes control of Regina's car so the girl can be free to knock down the creatures with her Excalibur, and Sakuya, who is in the passenger seat, also faces some with her sword. In the battle, Celia continues to lead her army when one of the voids manages to knock her into the air. Immediately, Amilis protects her while Dorub picks her up, keeping the girl safe. The undead says that her powers as a vampire queen are formidable, but she shouldn't rely on them for everything. Celia agrees and explains that her dress is causing a much greater overload than she expected. Even exhausted, Celia returns to the battle because she didn't want to go back to being the helpless girl she was 6 years ago, remembering that Leonis entrusted his life to her, and so she must also take risks to keep the boy safe. Dorub comments that he is also willing to accept his burial if necessary. Emilis agrees and says there is no better place for a warrior to die than in battle, but Nefiscal questions his companions after all. They were skeletons who died a long time ago. While the fight continues, Leonis remains busy absorbing the souls of the city's people. However, Terrace begins to prepare to cast another spell. Leonis thinks he still needs a lot of time to gather enough energy to defeat the goddess and quickly orders everyone to run away. With the command, everyone starts to retreat just in time for Terrace to launch several fireballs over the battlefield, leaving everything in flames. The few who remain are saved by the 3 undead, while Celia saves Leonis. At the same time, the girls realize from a distance that the battlefield is in flames and try once again to communicate with Celia. But again, they get no response. They are left wondering if she and Leonis are okay, but all they can do is wait. Realizing that they were still far away, Arl decides to conserve as much strength as possible to be ready when the time comes to attack. Then the girls reach a bridge and Elphine realizes they are about to encounter an obstruction in the way. With no other option, they all jump to the other side of the bridge and fortunately land safely. But suddenly a huge void appears behind them. However, before it can attack, Sherry uses her whip to throw the creature away, protecting the girls once again as her king asked her to do. Meanwhile, the skeleton army continues to fight and Leonis finally finishes converting the souls of the people into a source of energy. However, Terrace begins to prepare to cast another destruction spell. Leonis is surprised by the Void Lord's capability, but he doesn't give up and starts transferring the energy source to his demonic sword. However, Terrace grabs a piece of a building to throw at them. Since Leonis was still occupied with the souls, Celia takes the lead and shatters the building with a combination of her Excalibur and vampire magic. Next, the boy begins to summon the magic of his sword, just as Roselia taught him. Terrace uses a spell of high sacred protection, creating a shield to protect herself. At this moment, the girls finally arrive at the location, and as soon as Arl spots the goddess, she prepares to attack. However, they encounter yet another obstruction on the way, even larger than the last. Elphine decides to harness the maximum power of the vehicles for them to move forward, while the other girls activate their sacred swords to attack at the right moment. And so Sakuya and Regina launch their attacks, and shortly after, Arl uses her demon-slaying sword, which manages to break the high protection spell and strike the goddess. Leonis wonders who managed to hit Terrace, but takes advantage of the moment to unleash his magic accumulated in his demonic sword, completely destroying the goddess. While the boy puts an end to that battle, Celia observes him and recalls her father saying that the demon lord would appear in the world when people needed him the most to defeat the voids. After everything is over, William and the others leave the skeletons' bodies. He comments that a knight's greatest pride is to fight alongside his master, and now they have no more regrets. Celia asks if William is going to the afterlife, where his parents and siblings are, and responds that he understands she will have a lonely journey, but that she must still fulfill the duty of House Cristelia to the end. The girl promises to continue fighting for all of them and bids farewell to the knights. As they leave, Celia hears Regina approaching. Immediately, Leonis signals for the 3 undead to return to the amulet and then hides the bodies of the other skeletons. Finally, the squad reunites. Everyone is happy to see that they are well, and Sakuya mentions that they found an elf in the city, exhausted after defeating the Void Lord. The rescue team then appears, bringing the medical team. And so, as everyone returns home, Leonis thinks that it was the elf who broke Tiris' protection spell and wonders what a heroine like her was doing in that era. Celia interrupts his thoughts, and he notices that the girl is reading a book. She explains that it's a fairy tale she found in her father's office, telling the story of a demon king who lives in a bone castle, rides a skeletal horse, commands an army of skeletons, and does things like summoning lightning and spitting fire. At that moment, Leonis says that he doesn't spit fire. Celia questions how the boy could know that, as that's how the story goes. Leonis makes up that he just found the magic strange and begins to reflect that, despite being nothing more than a silly fairy tale, not to mention the true legend of the Demon King and the gods, the book may be what remains of his past. Then Celia comments that Leonis somewhat resembles the Demon King. The boy immediately says he doesn't spit fire. Later, he asks what happens at the end of the story. The vampire explains that the hero defeats the Demon King and everyone lives happily ever after, and Leonis clearly dislikes the ending. Later, after arriving home, Celia takes a bath while the demon updates Sherry and Blackas about the situation. He tells them he met Nephekis and that the resurrection of Tiris was part of his plan. Leonis then warns the two that the next time Nephekis appears, they will make sure he spills everything, including how he created a fake Roselia. Sherry asks Leonis to be careful with the heroine Arl, and the demon agrees, wondering if the elf came there to defeat him. Sherry explains that for now, the elf is in the medical room recovering, and Leonis instructs the girl to investigate to discover Arl's objective. After discussing important matters, the servant once again reveals her jealousy towards the vampire queen, this time commenting on Leonis gifting her the dress of the true ancestor. At this moment, Celia finishes her bath. Sherry and Blackas leave, and the vampire proceeds to feed on Leonis' blood, explaining that she needed to replenish the energy spent on the dress. Meanwhile, Elfine investigates the confusion in the 7th Assault Garden and the restart of the 3rd Assault Garden, suspecting a connection between them. She believes the explanation might lie in the artificial elementals of the Phil Foundation. During her research, she stumbles upon a heavily protected file and decides to investigate. Simultaneously, Sakuya trains with her sword, acknowledging that Arl is superior in every aspect of combat. Therefore, she realizes she must exert even more effort to surpass the elf. At the same time, Arl wakes up in the hospital and realizes that the fact she hasn't disappeared yet means her mission is not complete. The elf destroys a wall in the infirmary to pursue her new objective, waking up all the girls. Elfine notices the destruction through the computer data. The next day, Leonis walks through the city with Celia, contemplating the expansion of his territory until the entire human empire is his and people bow before him. However, at that moment, a child stumbles and Leonis helps her, displaying kindness that contradicts his words.